The scientist recalled that many years ago this world was calm and beautiful. He imagined residential buildings with colored roofs, and nearby there were power lines. But one day, reality and fantasy merged, turning this world into something like a game. Dark clouds appeared and the sky turned red. A dragon flew in the sky, and mythical beasts raged near multi-story buildings. Monsters attacked the townspeople, making them feel afraid. Many dungeons and secret realms began to appear, infested with wild monsters and creatures. The world was on the verge of destruction. However, the student believed that humanity would never lose. A fire was burning on a large pedestal. Below stood brave fighters with weapons. During this revolution, their ancestors mastered extraordinary forces that influenced human activity. The magician used fire to attack the fierce dragon. A man with a shield defended himself from an attack by a werewolf in a helmet. The fighter was able to bypass the giant lycanthrope and attack him. They gained strength to fight the monsters. The emergence of job changers has allowed some cities to survive. Against the backdrop of multi-story buildings, people raise their weapons upward. Daoshin, Central Park, entrance to the forest reserve. Behind the dense forest you can see residential apartment buildings. On the tree trunk, there was a building with a round arena and scientists' apparatus. One of them told a crowd of people that the monsters continued to harm them. A man in a white coat and glasses said that not all job changers are ready to face monsters, and all professions are divided into 3 main categories: combat, support, and civilian. The guy in black sneakers with red laces took a step forward. He was wearing a gray t-shirt and a black jacket. The scientist stated that civilians make up 90% of the total population, and peace is protected by the remaining 10% of martial professions. The main character had white hair and yellow eyes, and stood behind the rest of the people. The guy frowned, narrowing his eyes. He clenched his pale hand into a fist. The protagonist remembered that when he was a child, he was told that resistance would only result in wasting your sister's talent. Strangers took his sister away, saying that this world was protected not by him, but by them. The main character's name was Ling Chanfeng, and people turned to look at him, whispering to each other. They asked if that rare profession had awakened in him, if he was participating in today's assessment competition, and if he was afraid. Ling Chanfeng waved to everyone with a smile and said hello. He said he came just in time. Someone began to squeeze between the two guys, ordering them to let her through. A red-haired girl in a skirt and jacket pushed those present. She displeasedly asked Ling Chanfeng why he came so late. The main character looked at her in surprise. The girl's name was Kai Yanren, and she was a fire mage. She pointed at the guy with a smug smile. She said that she thought that having received a terrible profession, he would not dare to come here. Ling Chanfeng bowed his head and closed his eyes while the others looked at him in shock. He said that there are no terrible professions, only terrible people. Kai Yanren put her hands on her hips and said that he didn't even have friends to team up with. She asked if he had any luck in life, and the main character remained silent. Ling Chanfeng turned away from her, saying that he had no plans to team up with anyone. Kai Yanren was taken aback, looking after him, and said that it was very reckless to participate in such a competition alone. She believed that first he should find allies, and only then take part in the evaluation competition. The main character raised his eyebrows and closed his eyes. He replied that having like-minded people only brings an exchange of experience. Participating alone would be more reasonable. The red-haired girl looked at him displeasedly and called him stubborn. She said that if something goes wrong, she is not going to save him. While people were looking at them, Ling Chanfeng walked away from the girl in a different direction. Kai Yanren said that if he lowered his temper, she would allow him to join his team. According to her, out of all the students at Daoshin High School, only he can compare with her, and it is better to take him than some quitter. The guy with the gun in his hand said that Ling Chanfeng's profession might not be that strong. His bespectacled friend agreed with him and said that the assessment competition would put everything in its place. The scientist walked to his desk, looking at the huge platform with hieroglyphs. He announced that the secret realm had been activated, and upon stepping onto the platform, they were transported to the peripheral area of the secret realm. The students were on edge. They smiled, raising their fists in the air. The scientist announced that they would have 3 days after reaching level 3 and the minimum for professionals. they would officially become qualified monster hunters. The man in glasses and a robe frowned. He recalled that the zone is limited by 3 outer layers, whose borders are very dangerous to cross. As soon as the assessment test began, Ling Chanfeng surged ahead, overtaking the rest of the students. Kai Yanren began to get angry. She furiously clenched her hand into a fist and asked why he was so capable, since he was ahead of her again. The main character was running up the stairs while the girl was trying to catch up with him. He climbed onto the platform first, and Kai Yanren came right after him. She shouted that since middle school he had been the best in everything, and when he graduated from high school he surpassed her again. The rest of the students looked tired. They were shocked by the guy's speed. One of them said that Ling Chanfeng's profession may not be the best, but his physical fitness is truly admirable. Light and fiery traces lit up around the main character. It was announced. Preparations for teleportation were completed. Destination: Forest Reserve. The countdown to activation has begun. The airflow lifted Ling Chanfeng's hair upward. He thought that the day of the test assessing the level of professionalism had arrived. Teleportation began. A portal appeared in front of the main character, where he went. He arrived at the Forest Reserve, the sun's rays breaking through the canopy of trees. The black-haired scientist turned to his colleague and asked what level these students could reach. The man with glasses looked at the sky and replied that reaching the 5th level would be considered a good result, but among all of them, only Kai Yanren was worthy of attention. According to him, fire mages are quite rare, but have a significant advantage in both defense and attack. Regarding Ling Chanfeng, he said that on the day of his awakening, a strange anomaly was observed in the sky. He became the only magician who is classified as a martial artist. The main character landed on the grass in the reserve. The scientist said that throughout history there have been several cases of observing a strange anomaly in the sky, but as a result it turned out that the profession awakened in a person was useless. Ling Chanfeng stood up and decided to look around. The scientist said that he had researched the undead creatures he had summoned. Their abilities were comparable to those of second-tier monsters. For many years now, no young talents have appeared in Daochin. The main character frowned when he noticed movements in the bushes. A red rabbit with large fangs jumped out and growled with hostility. Ling Chanfeng narrowed his eyes, realizing that this was a level 1 wild rabbit. He began to take his weapon out of its sheath, deciding that such a monster would be suitable for warming up. In an instant, he attacked the wild rabbit. The steel on the knife glistened in the sun. The defeated monster fell to the ground and let out a death roar while the main character looked at him. The wild rabbit's eyes closed and its body twitched before it died. A system window appears. The first level wild rabbit is defeated. You have earned 5% of experience. Ling Chanfeng looked at him and exhaled tiredly, realizing that he could handle first-level monsters alone. The main character is a recently awakened professional. In this world, when a person turns 18, he gets the opportunity to change his occupation in the Job Change Tower. A group of awakened ones led by Kai Yanren are walking along a ravine. After changing profession, a person is faced with a choice. He can continue to live as an ordinary person, or he can take part in the evaluation test to become a skilled monster hunter. A group of students were hiding behind the bushes, watching the anthropomorphic monsters. Ling Chanfeng was hiding behind a tree trunk, holding a dagger. He decided to become a professional not because of patriotism or money. The guy noticed a giant rabbit in the bushes eating carrots. The main character saw his parents being drafted into military service, after which they never returned. His sister was forcibly taken away because of her talent, and he couldn't do anything about it. Realizing how powerless he was in a country where even the laws could not protect his loved ones, he decided that he must become stronger. He pushed away the beaten rabbit, whose soul was being released. Orange and blue lines of light hovered around Ling Chanfeng as he held the knife in his hands. Suddenly something caught his attention, and he looked to the side. A rodent the size of a man stood next to the trees. It was a second-level gray rat. It had a rat's whiskers and red evil eyes. Ling Chanfeng had a bruise on his face and was breathing heavily. As he knows, the monsters of this secret realm are scattered in different areas and should not appear so quickly. A dark magical aura appeared around his hands. He understood that dealing with a level 2 monster would not be so easy. He released the broken undead of the first level. It was a monster in a red cape with a scythe in his hands. The undead swung his scythe at the rat after Ling Chanfeng ordered him to deal with it. The earth's crust began to collapse and crack. Behind the main character, several more gray rats crawled out of the ground. He looked back suspiciously, frowning. Ling Chanfeng didn't understand why there were so many second-tier monsters here. The gray rat grabbed the hilt of the undead scythe. The main character understood that if faced with such opponents on the first day, most teams would not have a chance to win. A smile appears on the guy's face as he controls the dark energy in his hands. He said that he was able to summon several creatures at once. Ling Chanfeng stood next to his undead near the pedestal where the fire was burning. The crowd ridiculed and insulted him. The main character moved his hand forward to demonstrate the undead. A system window appeared. First level undead. Combat strength 5. People said that his undead had the fighting strength of an ordinary person, and summoning them took so much mana that it was better for him to fight himself. Kai Yanren began to get angry. She burst into flames and shouted that she would now shut up these guys. The balding teacher stopped her and told her not to interfere. Ling Chanfeng frowned slightly and pursed his lips as he clicked on his system window. The inscription on the system window, Ling Chanfeng. Profession, Lord of the Dead, unique hidden profession, level 1, strength 15, durability 15, spirit 30, agility 15, number of summoned undead 1 of 4. Skill, summoning and controlling undead. Spiritual destruction, the ability to strike within 5 meters, overwhelming the opponent's mind. Unique hidden attribute, Supreme Awakening, unlocked at level 6. He paid attention to the information about the Supreme Awakening. The main character considered the guys who ridiculed him to be the same idiots as the people who kidnapped his sister. He clenched his teeth angrily, considering himself no ordinary summoner. He was the Lord of the Undead. Purple lightning appeared around the guy, and he ordered the undead to rise. Several dark silhouettes in a red robe immediately appeared in front of him. One of the undead approached the huge rat. Then, several of the protagonist's minions swung at the opponents at once. The undead killed giant rats with swings of their scythes. 3 identical system windows appeared. Your undead killed the second-level gray rat. A satisfied grin appeared on Ling Chanfeng's face. A new system window has appeared. You have gained 100 experience points. You have reached the second level. A purple glow appeared around Ling Chanfeng. He saw one of the gray rats grab the handle of his henchman's scythe. Suddenly, an overgrown rodent struck the undead body with its paw, causing it to evaporate. The protagonist's pupils narrowed. The guy was taken aback, because rats cannot be stronger than the undead he summoned. His summoned undead began to dissolve into thin air. The rat's long tail wriggled in the air. Suddenly, the rodent's fangs became larger and sharper. His paws became powerful, and bat wings appeared on his back. Ling Chanfeng frowned, mouth parted. He realized that it was the Rat King who had also increased his level. The main character clenched his hand into a fist, and the minions he had summoned flew up to him. The guy pointed his finger forward, ordering the undead to attack. All 3 minions surrounded the Rat King. Ling Chanfeng was thinking that the second-level monsters, which should not appear on the outskirts of the zone, suddenly gathered here. They have upgraded their level to that of elite monsters. Although this is a test of professionalism, there are too many of them, but Ling Chanfeng was willing to kill these elite monsters. The Rat King soared into the skies, attacking the 3 minions. The main character extended his hand forward, concentrating energy there. He said that if 3 undead were not enough, he would summon 3 more. 3 more minions with different weapons appeared in the air around the Rat King. They attacked the monster at once, causing it to collapse to the ground. Ling Chanfeng's gaze was focused and serious. The Rat King got out of the trap, flying towards the guy. There were several meters between them. The guy realized that the monster was very resourceful since it decided to attack him. The main character decided to use spiritual destruction. The energy in his hands made his hair fly in the wind. Many black small hands began to rush towards the rat's head. They reached for his red eye. Suddenly, the Rat King's eyes closed. The monster seemed to be in prostration. Many red eyes were looking at him in the darkness. A creepy face appeared in front of the rat's face and ordered him to obey. The Rat King opened his mouth. The capillaries in his eyes burst, and a mark appeared on his forehead. The mark resembled an eye with a pupil and wings. The rat's eye began to dissipate into the darkness. Suddenly, the monster's head simply exploded, pieces of skin flying everywhere. Ling Chanfeng was taken aback, his pupils constricted. He realized that the monster had seriously destroyed itself. The guy looked at the corpse of the Rat King while the undead stood next to him. His spiritual destruction can suppress the minds of opponents within a 5-meter radius. However, the main character suggested that the monster's mind was already under the influence of someone's spiritual destruction. He scared the Rat King, but did not force him to obey. A system window appears. You killed a level 4 monster. Ling Chanfeng looked to the side with a serious face. It is now important for him to raise his level to 6. He remembered the inscription on the system window that the Supreme Awakening opens at the 6th level. Green leaves swirled in the air. The main character walked towards the tree while his undead creatures followed him. He wanted his sister to wait for him. Screams could be heard in the dense forests. Someone was using a war shield. The wild boar ran towards the people, dust flying from under its hooves. The guy tried to hold back the boar with a shield, not understanding where he still had the strength. The girl began to take out a potion to give it to her ally. Someone's fists burst into flames and were aimed at the enemy. The boar's entire body was engulfed in fire, and he roared. The guy and the girl were hiding behind a shield from the fire. A system window has appeared. Your team has defeated a level 3 armored boar. The guy with the shield and the girl with the potions looked in shock at the burning corpse of the animal. One of Kai Yanren's fists was still burning. She sighed tiredly. A system window appears. You have gained 100 experience points. You have reached the 2nd level. She approached her teammates and said that they had finally done it. She assumed that their team would deal with even 3rd level monsters on the first day of the test. The guy with the shield was glad that they had a lot of healing potions and a healer. Otherwise, he wouldn't have lasted so long. Kai Yanren confidently crossed her arms over her chest, saying that before the end of the test, she would encounter level 5 monsters. She was a 2nd level fire mage. The guy with the shield was called Aji. He was a level 2 combat shield. He said he hopes to reach at least the 3rd level. His family hopes they can make money from this. The girl with blonde hair was called Zioyan. She is a 2nd level healer. She said that the higher the level of the monster, the more complex the strategy it needs. For a level 5 monster, you will need at least 1 level 5 warrior and 2 level 4 supports. Suddenly, the ground under their feet began to shake, and they were taken aback. The trees shook due to the shaking of the earth. They noticed that something was approaching. Something stone began to appear from the treetops. Between the trees, a stone primate of the 6th level appeared, which was of gigantic size. Kai Yanren looked at the monster intensely. Aji began to run and told everyone to split up. Otherwise, the primate would catch them. Suddenly, Zioyan collapsed to the ground, her bare knees touching the grass. While her allies looked at her, she said in horror that her legs were not listening to her. The numb girl squealed loudly when she saw a giant monster in front of her. The stone primate looked at her with its red eyes. Kai Yanren was taken aback, calling out Zioyan's name. Aji took off and ran forward. He covered himself and the girl with a shield, saying that he was coming. The guy clenched his teeth, his face sweating. Behind him was Zioyan, who closed her eyes in fear. Aji tried to reassure himself that every pro faces this problem. He remembered his last meeting with his elderly parents. The guy asked them not to worry and said that if he became an official pro, the state would pay them benefits. His mother replied that the main thing is that everything is fine with him. The son said to look at his armor, laughing. A huge stone fist was about to hit him, and the girl with all its might. Aji hugged Zioyan, covering himself with a shield. He promised that he would not back down, because the protection of this world rests with them. The rock ape hit them, frowning. Kai Yanren suddenly turned pale and her pupils shrank. She called out to her comrades in horror. The bright rays of the sun fell on the stone hand of the primate. The monster looked down in surprise, frowning. The undead stood in front of the professionals with a scythe in their hands. The undead's eyes glowed brightly. Aji looked at him in fear, and Zioyan was shocked. Ling Chanfeng walked up to Kai Yanren from behind and said that he didn't think so. The main character frowned and put one hand in his pocket. Kai Yanren was surprised and asked where he came from. Ling Chanfeng looked seriously at the stone primate and said that the duty of a pro is to protect those he decides to protect. The undead swung its scythe, breaking through the monster's stone hand. The primate looked in shock as his hand fell apart into small stones. Kai Yanren's eyes bulged and her pupils shrank. She couldn't believe that he had defeated a level 6 monster with one blow. An undead in a red robe hovered near the monster. The stone primate decided to feel his left hand, but found nothing there. Immediately after this, the huge monster began to fall. Kai Yanren turned around and pointed at the monster. She wanted to say something to Ling Chanfeng. However, the guy was not there. The girl frowned, opening her mouth slightly. She clenched her hand into a fist, realizing that she had already seen the creature with the scythe. He was summoned by Ling Chanfeng that day during the profession change ceremony. The girl thought that he easily defeated a level 6 monster. She didn't understand whether he was hiding his power or what level he was at now. Kai Yanren immediately ran to her allies, asking if they were okay. Aji raised his hand and replied that he was fine, but he needed a new pair of pants. Zioyan walked away from him in disgust. Aji awkwardly scratched his head and replied that he was joking. Kai Yanren put her hand on her hip and asked the guys if they had seen Ling Chanfeng. The black-haired guy remembered how the main character ran past broken trees. He pointed in the direction with his finger. A blonde stood behind him. He said that Ling Chanfeng chased the stone primate in that direction. Zioyan raised her finger while Kai Yanren was looking at her and said that the creature looked like the Reaper from the movies and so seriously injured the monster. She asked if Ling Chanfeng was going to finish off the primate. Aji replied that this is a 6th level monster and the guy will get a lot of experience. The red-haired girl frowned slightly in fear. She asked if they had attended the job change ceremony and if they remembered Ling Chanfeng's profession. Aji looked at the blonde and said that the main character is a summoner of the undead. She repeated his words. Suddenly, they looked at Kai Yanren in shock, taken aback. The red-haired girl seemed serious. She said that although it was difficult for her to admit it, he was probably stronger than they could imagine. The main character walked forward confidently, his hands clenched into fists. Fallen trees lay around him. Behind the forest one could see high mountains where there was fog. The stone primate stood on the cliff of a mountain. Ling Chanfeng said that high-level monsters are limited to strict limits in space. A monster of the 6th level cannot leave the central zone. The main character slowly walked towards the giant monster, saying that he managed to leave the zone. In addition, he deliberately walked towards him. He asked who gave the primate this order. The stone monster turned to him and screamed furiously. Ling Chanfeng closed his eyes dissatisfiedly and said that since he himself would not say it, he would use improved spiritual destruction. The guy suddenly opened his eyes and frowned. His pupil constricted and he used mind reading. The stone ape's eyes narrowed as if he were terrified. The main character seemed to see a cave where there was a long staircase. Someone said that his magical contract was destroyed. He asked if the tiny handful of people had brought anyone worthwhile. He ordered Shangxiao to bring him to him. The strange creature had horns and spikes on its shoulders. Its eyes and mouth were red, and on its chest was the same eye symbol. The monster said that the person would become one of his subordinates. Ling Chanfeng's pupil turned completely white as soon as he saw the familiar symbol. The same seal appeared on the stone primate's forehead. It hung over the main character. The monster asked if he had killed his best servants. The guy frowned and with a serious expression on his face suggested that he was responsible for all this. There was a haze floating around the stone primate. He named Ling Chanfeng as the person who was able to defeat Shangxiao at just the 5th level. He asked if he did it with a mind-altering ability. The monster said that this would not work on him because he was of the royal level. The main character frowned and grinned, saying that defeating him would give him a lot of experience. The monster sank down to him and began to laugh. He approached the guy and asked if he thought that as long as he was in charge, he could do whatever he wanted. He declared that he would soon fulfill his great plan, and when he began to rule over people, he and his friends would become a delicacy for him. Ling Chanfeng became angry, clenched his hand into a fist, and ordered the monster to repeat his words. He raised his hand with dark strength. His undead cut his opponent's limb with a scythe. The main character looked at the enemy with irritation and anger and said that he hates being blackmailed by his loved ones. All that was left of the primate was the head. He asked if the guy thought that after killing a level 6 monster he could compete with him. The top of the monster's head floated in the air, and he declared that once he won, they would all die. Several system windows appeared. Your undead killed a level 6 giant stone primate. You have gained 100 experience points and moved to level 6. Ling Chanfong reached the desired level, and the Supreme Awakening was activated. A dark aura appeared around the guy, and his eyes opened wide. He began to float in space as a dark force circled around him. Black smoke appeared around Kai Yanran and her squad, which significantly reduced visibility, forcing them to be more careful. Suddenly, they began to look scared when they saw something. There was a dark purple dragon hovering in the clouds, with someone standing on its head. The mythical creature approached Ling Chanfang. Among the smoke, one could see the silhouette of a man in a raincoat. The main character's eyes opened wide and his pupils constricted. He said that this is the true Lord. In the night sky, a dragon hovered among the clouds, surrounded by purple lightning. Near the mountains, there was a city where people whispered about what they had seen. They asked if it was a monster invasion. A crowd of people in black jackets stood in the square. They discussed that this could not happen, because there were many awakened ones in their city. Behind them stood a girl in a white coat. She had long green-yellow hair and a cap. She lifted the peak of her cap, smiling. She had blue eyes. The girl said that this is the second awakening, and their former classmates from Dacheng High School are not that bad. While the crowd was looking at the dragon, it turned around and walked towards the residential buildings. She was sorry that she had to leave the city, because she would have loved to have met them. The scientists stood near the instrument panel, which was located in the arena among the trees. One of them asked the other how they managed it and whether it still worked. The man with a joyful face clenched his hand into a fist, saying that this is the first case of the second awakening in the management bureau of Daja branch of Dachin. We need to find him quickly. While the bespectacled scientist panikedly entered data on the panel, his colleague said that if the case was confirmed, they could outdo other branches. The bespectacled scientist turned to his colleague with a worried face. He said that usually activating the space stone opens up a secret realm, but now it seems like something is preventing it. The two of them placed their hands on the blue panel, but their request was rejected. They said that they had tried all the methods, but the passage to the kingdom was closed. They suggested that the fluctuations in the energies of the second awakening were preventing its full opening. The bespectacled scientist sweated and gritted his teeth, saying that this might not be a temporary effect. The blue portal on the circular platform began to close. Scientists looked at this and realized that the secret kingdom had closed entirely. A huge red beam rose next to the gloomy mountains. Various mythical creatures were gathered around this fiery ray. Only their silhouettes were visible. The dragon with bright blue eyes smiled, showing off its fangs. He said that the grand sacrifice ceremony is finally completed. Now these little people will not escape. Other hostile creatures growled and howled next to him. An ugly creature with horns and growths on its shoulders pointed towards the fiery beam. His subjects humbly headed there, while he said that in the future no one would interfere with them. The bright rays of the sun barely made their way through the thick crown of trees on which vines hung. 3 professionals walked next to the giant tree trunks. They praised their friend named Sanjan, who had reached the 3rd level. Sanjan replied that everyone thinks that Kai Yanran's team is the coolest, but they just don't know what he is capable of. The 3 guys continued to walk along the forest path. Suddenly, a huge ogre appeared among the trees behind them with a club in his hands. The team of professionals turned around and looked at him. A monster of colossal size growled aggressively, opening its mouth wide. He was level 6. A group of guys immediately panicked and got scared, not understanding what it was. Among the dense forest, a scream was heard among the green foliage. Giant purple snakes attacked other test subjects. They hugged them as they screamed. Another group of professionals encountered a pack of wild animals in the forest, not understanding where they came from, because they clearly had not gone deep into the secret kingdom. A huge spider with green eyes wove a web and took 2 people hostage. On the teleportation platform to the secret kingdom, the scientist looked at his colleague from an elevated position and asked what could have gone wrong and why the secret kingdom was closed. A scientist in glasses was typing something on a computer, looking at the platform. He was sure that there was some kind of force that was blocking the power of the space stone and preventing it from opening. He frowned and gritted his teeth, saying that if the stone was powerless, the students simply would not be able to get out of there. His colleague looked at him doomedly and asked if they would really lose a genius again, locked in the space of newcomers. The man with glasses closed his laptop and said that they were powerless. He looked at the sunlit hieroglyphs on the platform. The scientist said that one can only hope that the people inside the secret kingdom can defeat this creature. Several system windows have appeared. The Supreme Awakening is complete. Occupation changed to Lord of the Undead. Silhouette of a man with black hair. A purple fire glows behind him. An unknown voice said that several unique divine skills had been obtained. Supreme Strength, Unbending Will. Ling Chanfeng began to open his eyes, listening to this voice. He stood among the mountains at sunset, listening to a story about skills. The Supreme Power gives 10 times higher characteristics to the summoned creatures. Their skills will improve as the main character's level increases. Unbending will transfers the damage received to the summoned creatures, making Ling Chanfeng immortal, because their number is not limited. The guy looked around and asked who was talking. It turned out that this was the spirit of the divine system of professions. Any person who awakens the divine profession within himself will immediately have a spirit attached to him. Ling Chanfeng's eyes opened wide. He frowned and thoughtfully repeated the words about the divine profession system. The spirit said his name was a fallen angel. Pink clouds floated in the dark sky, and green particles hovered in the air. The main character asked the fallen angel if others could hear him. The fallen angel replied that only the Lord of the Undead could hear his voice and mentally give orders. While the guy walked through the forest grass, a black shadow spread next to him. Ling Chanfeng asked what orders the spirit could carry out. He replied that with his current access, he could scan the area within a 500-meter radius for signs of life. The fallen angel asked if he should start scanning. The sun's rays fell on the guy's face. He lowered his eyebrows, realizing that access depended on his level, and ordered the scan to begin. After some time, the scanning was completed and 4 living organisms were found within 500 meters. The main character frowned and looked around, guessing that the 3 were Kai Yanren's team and another enemy. A shadow fell over the guy's eyes. He asked if the spirit could be more precise. The fallen angel replied that he could not discern specific signs of life, but Ling Chanfeng could use the powers of the vengeful undead spirit for detailed analysis. The main character was surprised and asked if the level of his undead had increased. Dark power surrounded the guy's palms. 3 henchmen in a red robe immediately appeared around him. Ling Chanfeng waved his hand at them and ordered them to explore this area. The undead immediately went into the forest, flying past the trees. The minions quickly hovered above the ground. Ling Chanfeng sat on the grass waiting. He was interested in trying out a new ability. He frowned and closed his eyes. Suddenly, the other undead's eyes opened wide. Now the henchman had the guy's yellow eyes and found himself in the body of an undead. The main character looked at his bony hands, as if he had done this as a human. He now understood what the perception of feelings is. Previously, he could only give orders, but now he can directly control the undead by exchanging bodies with them. While his real body sat on the grass, he explored the forest with other undead creatures. Suddenly, he discovered something. He frowned. Flying up to the ravine, he saw a fire and acrid smoke. These traces were left by the Kai Yanren team. The main character did not understand where they went. The undead in the face of Ling Chanfeng narrowed his eyes, while a light smoke hovered nearby. He ordered the fallen angel to scan the new area. No signs of life were found. The main character was slightly taken aback, opening his mouth slightly. He didn't understand where they could disappear to in less than a minute. It is difficult to move so quickly in a dense forest. It is unlikely that they could escape. The undead inspected every corner of the smoky forest. Ling Chanfeng knew that whoever won this fight would leave marks on the ground. However, there are no traces. They seem to have disappeared. The main character got up from the ground and ran forward. He believed that people don't just disappear. Perhaps it was the fault of the creature they encountered. The guy ran through the forest, where trees were lying. Kai Yanren was a firebender and a professional. and therefore Ling Chanfeng believed that in the outskirts of the secret kingdom, there were only low-level monsters, and they would not cause any harm to her team. He gritted his teeth and sweat ran down his face. Suddenly, he remembered that symbol in the shape of an eye and the creature that told him that he would fulfill his great plan. According to him, when he rules the people, he and his friends will become a delicacy for him. Ling Chanfeng stopped abruptly as the wind ruffled his hair. He stood among the trees, thinking that this creature rules this kingdom. He did not understand what he was trying to achieve if he was talking about the rule of people and the great plan of revival. More and more dark energy was concentrated in his hands. Undead creatures immediately began to emerge from the ground. They appeared like shadows and had a dark aura around them. Ling Chanfeng realized that if the creature was targeting people in the secret realm, then sooner or later it would get to him. So he decided to find him and attack him first. Thick tree crowns completely covered the sky. While the main character put his hand to the ground, more and more henchmen appeared from everywhere. The red eye of one of the undead sparkled brightly. Behind Ling Chanfeng was his own army with weapons. He pointed his finger at them and ordered them to clear out the entire secret kingdom and kill all the monsters that came their way. Dense forests surrounded rocky mountains. Zioyan slowly opened her eyes as her name was called. An excited Agi woke her up, and Kai Yanren stood behind him. All around them was only a dark, damp cave. Kai Yanren helped Zioyan stand up, asking if she was injured. Aji looked around and saw a huge number of students and their teams who were in a state of shock. They helped each other get up. An unfamiliar voice greeted them, and they began to look around in confusion, not understanding who was speaking. Suddenly, a cliff appeared next to them, from where a red light came. The disciples did not know what was happening. A huge stone statue of a man in a robe with a hood appeared next to them. In front of him was a round platform. A staircase led to it from another platform, where people were standing. They didn't understand what this place was. Outside the platform, black silhouettes of monsters could be seen. The green-haired girl and her ally looked at the monsters in surprise. The guys from the other team were also confused at the sight of the monsters. A tall creature with horns and a symbol on its chest appeared. He was the 9th child of evil, a king-level secret boss. The child of evil said that this stone statue is the protector of the altar. Below him were his minions, each with a purple seal on their forehead. The students looked at them with horror and apprehension, asking if he was the boss of the lair and where he was from if they had a regular exam. The 9th child of evil opened its terrifying mouth with sharp fangs. He shouted that they were invading again and again, killing his people for decades. The students with multicolored hair were very scared, gritting their teeth. The protector of the altar was covered in a red aura. The child of evil pointed his finger at him and ordered the people to take an oath of allegiance at the altar. He promised not only to forgive their sins, but also to give them the power of the master of evil. The monster hovered right above his servants. The students began to anxiously talk among themselves about the power of the Lord of Evil. This is a monster from the history books who made a contract with thousands of people, turning them into his servants. They considered this nonsense, because these monsters died out 100 years ago. The child of evil's eye sparkled, and he smiled widely. The monster said that he had recreated the altar on the site where the Lord of Evil was born, and by stepping on it, they would be able to enter into a contract with him and receive his power. Kai Yanren crossed her arms and looked at him dissatisfied. She asked why he himself did not step on this altar and receive this power. The students looked at her in surprise. The child of evil pointed to his monsters and said that he had already mastered part of the power under the contract, and these monsters serve him. He began to smile, looking at them with his blue eyes. According to him, this is only a small part of the power of the Lord of Evil, and only people can get the full power. Once upon a time, the master of evil was a man himself. There were dark particles floating around the stone statue. Kai Yanren looked at the monster in shock, as did the rest of the students. They did not understand why a person should subjugate his own species. The child of evil stood in front of the statue, raising his hands. He said that all people experience hypocrisy and envy of those who are stronger. He thanked them for their stupidity, because it was because of this that the demon race had cultivated such talent. The students looked at him accusingly as he asked if they had already made their choice. The guy with yellow hair frowned and remained silent. He turned to the stairs and went there. He was immediately stopped by one of the students, asking where he was going. The blonde replied that he was going to the altar and asked why not try if it would help him become stronger. Suddenly, an explosion thundered on the stairs, blinding the students. The blonde turned around and glared with his violet eyes. Kai Yanren pointed her burning hand forward, with her allies standing behind her. She said that man and monster are incompatible. The girl asked if he really thought that they brought them here to make them stronger. The blonde snapped at her, looking at the rest of the students. He said that guys with such strong professions would become strong, but this would not happen to him, an insignificant swordsman. He believed that his future would not change even if he survived this dungeon. The blonde man with the sword on his back turned away from them and said that he suddenly had a chance to change his fate. Even if it was a hoax, he was willing to risk his life. Aji frowned and told the evil Kai Yanren that it was useless and the guy would not listen to her. The blonde jumped high over the broken stairs. He landed near the hands of the stone statue and said that he had never received such a lucky ticket. Looking into the face of the statue, he asked to be allowed to be the main character at least once. The child of evil leaned forward and laughed smugly. The guy's mouth dropped open and his eyes rolled back. Dark energy began to enter into him. His entire body was engulfed in a black and red aura. He smiled and enjoyed the power. His eyes were wide open, and he said he could feel his body filling with power. He began to change. His body became bigger and scarier. Demonic flesh surrounded his body. He grinned angrily. The guy became a level 7 fallen demon swordsman. The disciples led by Kai Yanren looked at him with fear, realizing that he had truly become stronger. The child of evil extended her hand forward and commanded the fallen swordsman to prove his loyalty to the great lord of evil. Half of the blonde's face and body were covered with red skin, and he grew a horn. He asked how he could do this. The monster went crazy and stuck out its tongue. He ordered to kill all the people. Looking at the crowd of confused students, the fallen swordsman began to take out a sword from his flesh. He raised the blade above himself, smiling and laughing. He enjoyed his newfound strength. His name was Lu Lion. The disciples looked at him angrily, condemning him. They shouted that monsters had destroyed their homeland, asking if he wanted to betray people for their sake. The guy with blue hair pointed his finger at him and shouted that the pros wouldn't forgive him for this. The child of evil smiled widely, as did his servants, and ordered the successor of the Lord of Evil to give the people a taste of fear. The girl with long hair put her hand on her chest. She told Lu Lion that her father worked in the Chinese bureau, and if he helped the monsters, she would report everything to him. She advised us to retreat, kill all these monsters, and get them out of here. The fallen swordsman looked at her with arrogance. He suddenly jumped off the altar. Landing right next to the girl, he scared everyone. His pupil constricted at her and said that she still didn't understand. With one move of his sword, he cut it open. The disciples looked on in fear and horror, saying that he had killed her. Lu Lion raised his head, smiling, and said that he couldn't stand such arrogant people. The students looked at his body covered in black lightning in shock as he said that he was now the boss. Well, the pros began to run away in fear, realizing that he really decided to kill everyone. Kai Yanren and her team tried to stop the escapers. She was convinced that they had to unite their forces against him. That was the only way they would survive. The frightened student shouted that Lu Lion was at level 7, they would not be able to fight him. Out of despair, they jumped from the platform, because there was nowhere to run. Lu Lion cut one disciple with his sword as he ran forward. He laughed madly, looking back. Swinging his sword, he fired several projectiles. He shouted that this is the kind of power a swordsman should have. The blade projectiles immediately hit the students' bodies, piercing them. One of the body projectiles towards a girl with pink hair, who fell. Suddenly, a ring of fire appeared around her, protecting her. Lu Lion turned around dissatisfied, not understanding what had happened. It was Kai Yanren. She was surrounded by fire that she had summoned. The maddened fallen demon swordsman raised his blade into the air. His whole body was covered with a red aura, and he shouted that he had endured the girl's arrogance for a long time. He asked if she could outshine him. He lowered his sword and said that at the second level she would not be able to do anything. A powerful beam was released from his sword. An orange sphere appeared in Kai Yanren's hands and summoned the phoenix feather armor. A fiery phoenix appeared in front of her, trying to shield the girl from the attack. However, Hyenrin was still pushed back. Aji managed to catch his captain. Zioyan called out to her in concern. Lu Lion put his sword on his shoulder and said that even the rare phoenix feather armor would not stop him. While the red aura glowed around him, he laughed and asked who else wanted to fight him. Kai Yanren covered the bodies of her allies with her body. The blonde asked her what they should do, because they couldn't cope. The red-haired girl looked at her and ordered her to buy time until help arrived. Aji looked at her incomprehensibly, and Zioyan said in fear that everyone was locked here and no one would be able to call for help. With a confident face, Kai Yanren replied that not all the students were here. Ling Chanfeng remained outside. A red bird with powerful claws flew out of the cave. Flying out from there, the bird crossed the purple barrier. Ling Chanfeng's big yellow eyes reflected what he saw. Sitting near a tree, he looked at the sky. Now he understood why he never found everyone after searching the dungeon. The villain's lair was hidden deep, and the main character assumed that there was a monster there that started it all. Fortunately, by increasing spiritual destruction to level 8, he can track the monster using the mind mark. The 9th child of evil turned around, baring his teeth, and asked how he dared to return without his permission. A red bird flew up to him and told him everything in an unknown language. The monster looked at him and asked if there was really a level 8 person outside who had dealt with all the demons. The child of evil frowned, his blue eyes lighting up the darkness. He said that this man dared to kill his servants, and it was not time yet. Hovering in the cave above his servants, he added that it would all be over soon. Lu Lion pierced another victim with his sword, while the monster ordered him to kill even more people to awaken the power. The fallen swordsman had completely turned into a demon, with nothing human left of him. He only wanted to kill. Kai Yanren covered the surviving disciples with her fiery wings. They said the girl talked about help, but there were only 4 of them left. The corpses of the remaining students lay on the floor of the platform. Kai Yanren narrowed her eyes, breathing heavily, and said that she was also already at the limit. When Lu Lion approached her, she fell to her knees. She knew that she no longer had a chance to surpass Ling Chanfeng. Suddenly, a bright explosion thundered at the top of the cave. Lu Lion turned around and saw a weapon flying at him. The protagonist's face appeared among the columns of smoke. He apologized for coming late. The scythe pierced the demon's body, causing him to scream furiously. Blood flowed from his chest. He fell to his knees and dropped his sword. As soon as the monster fell to the floor, the main character immediately ran to the others. Aji shielded his allies and the pink-haired girl. They called out to the guy. Ling Chanfeng stopped not far from them, turning back. Frowning, he looked around with his yellow eyes. The bloody corpses of students lay everywhere. Kai Yanren was weak, unconscious, and sweating profusely. Ling Chanfeng gritted his teeth and closed his eyes. He was sorry that he had come too late. Looking at the 9th child of evil, he ordered Zioyan to heal Kai Yanren. He clenched his hand into a fist and promised to deal with the rest himself. The blonde sighed in surprise as she held the red-haired girl in her arms. The child of evil pointed his finger at the main character. He asked if he knew what he would face by killing the successor of the great Lord of Evil. Ling Chanfeng smirked confidently as he looked at him and replied that it was his successor, not the evil lord. The monster's eyes glowed with blue fire. He ordered his many monster servants to kill everyone. With terrible faces, they looked at the survivors. While Zioyan was helping Kai Yanren, Aji approached Ling Chanfeng and said that he was strong, but there were too many opponents. The main character smiled and said that he would not fight alone, which made the black-haired guy taken aback. He immediately stood in front of Ling Chanfeng, covering them with a shield, and shouted that he would cover him. The main character put his hand on his shoulder and said that he was not talking about their team. Many red-robed undead appeared in the air. Ling Chanfeng raised his hand and ordered his army to come. His henchmen had a variety of weapons in their hands and headed forward. The army of the Child of Evil consisted of ogres, lycanthropes, and other mythical creatures. A monster resembling a bat flew over the battlefield. The monsters clashed in battle with the protagonist's army of undead. The minions attacked the dinosaur with the mark on its forehead. Aji smiled awkwardly and said that the creatures summoned by the main character can endure even these cool monsters. Ling Chanfeng frowned and replied that it was not that simple. He deliberately bluffed the boss by discovering his own mark in his mind. The child of evil smiled widely, showing off his sharp fangs. The main character said that judging by his reaction, his successor is just a trap. He asked if it seemed strange that he had taken such pains to set up a trap. But the death of his successor did not frighten him at all. Aji asked what kind of mark it was, but the question was ignored. Ling Chanfeng frowned and suggested that the monster did not need a successor, but a body capable of containing the power of the Lord of Evil. His eyes opened wide and his pupil constricted. He realized that the child of evil wants to control the power of the master of evil with a mark. Suddenly, a mark appeared on the red demon's forehead. Ling Chanfeng was suddenly attacked by a dark force. Aji and his shield were thrown back. Xiaoyan widened her eyes in fear and called out to them. The child of evil began to laugh evilly and point his finger at the main character, calling him a smart person. While blood was flowing from the guy's mouth, the monster confirmed his words. All these years he has been looking for a way to master the power of the master of evil. Both demons and humans will obey the contract. Thanks to this, he can force everyone to obey him. Ling Chanfeng's undead began to disperse into the air. The child of evil stated that in order to complete the contract, the powers of each servant must be absorbed. The more servants, the more power. He said the contractor would lose his mind, but he came up with a loophole. The maddened red-skinned demon with a mark on his forehead raised his hand. The child of evil revealed that as part of the contract's power, he placed a mark on the man as he walked up to the altar. When he has completely lost his mind, his mark activates. The demon brutally hit the main character with his hand. Ling Chanfeng flew back towards Aji and the other survivors, who called out to him. The child of evil said that he wished they would see him bring down the borders of the kingdom and invade the human world. Lying on his back, the main character opened his mouth and his pupils constricted. The mark on the monster's chest began to glow brightly, as did its fists. He ordered his servants to give him their powers. The souls of the demons began to come out through the eyes. The undead flew up from behind the monster and asked if the mark would disappear if he killed it. The summoned creature had Ling Chanfeng's eyes. He moved his mind there. The undead struck the monster's hand with its sword. The eyes of the child of evil expressed panic. He asked the main character if he was dead. From under the dark hood, Ling Chanfeng's bright yellow eyes were visible. He swung his sword powerfully, using tenfold supreme strength. The monster received a powerful blow to the head. The head of the child of evil was cut into 2 parts. He asked where such strength came from in a person. The main character moved back into his body, smoke floating around him. He said that this is a monarch and his strength cannot be imagined. While Xiaoyan held Kai Yanren, she and Aji looked at Ling Chanfeng. His t-shirt was torn on his chest. He clenched his hand into a fist and said that he would become one. There was a purple crystal floating in the air, surrounded by an aura of a similar color. The guy noticed this with a raised eyebrow. He asked the fallen angel if this item was obtained for the boss. The spirit replied that it was a different object. His undead held this crystal in his bony hands, and Ling Chanfeng guessed that this energy was similar to the power of the undead. The fallen angel replied that the level of the items was above the scanning limit. Aji frowned, confused, and tensed. He shouted to Ling Chanfeng to be careful. Next to the main character stood a terrifying red demon who growled aggressively at him. The guy was taken aback and looked at him a little scared, realizing that he had completely forgotten about him. The giant red monster slammed its hand onto the floor. Ling Chanfeng was thrown back by the shock wave. Aji immediately ran up to him, asking if he was okay. Xiaoyan looked at him with wide eyes. The main character raised his hand to stop them and said that he was fine. He said that the seal on the dungeon had to be lifted, so he ordered them to leave. The red demon was surrounded on all sides by summoned creatures. Ling Chanfeng rubbed the back of his hand over his beaten face. He said that the power of the contract had already taken possession of this monster, and he himself was already tired. He again ordered the others to flee. Xiaoyan looked at him worriedly. Aji took Kai Yanren into his arms. He told the others to run because they were only in the way. The monster that was once Lu Lion fought off the guy's henchmen. The main character was watching the battle when Aji shouted that they could only believe in him. Dissatisfied parents gathered near the platform for moving to the secret kingdom. One of them shouted that 3 days had already passed and his child had not returned yet. They stood behind the fence, saying that the location of the exam was determined by the Bureau administration. They waited for the short, balding man with glasses to explain. He replied that the exam always takes place with increased risk and his daughter is also inside the dungeon. He asked his parents to calm down and give them some time. Suddenly, the platform lit up with a blue light, which the scientist noticed. All attention was directed there. The man with glasses turned around worriedly. They shouted that someone had moved and someone had returned. The scientists climbed onto the platform where Kai Yanran and her team were. The man with glasses ran towards the girl. Her allies asked to call for help because Kai Yanran was still unconscious. The man in glasses was breathing heavily. He was sweating from exertion, calling the girl's name. The bespectacled scientist turned to his colleague and asked where the ambulance was. He was told that help was on the way and would arrive soon. The bespectacled man who was Kai Yanran's father hugged her. Zioyan told him that she tried to heal the girl, but her level was too low. The scientist with glasses looked at the girl with pink hair and Aji, asking what happened there and where the others were. Tears flowed from Aji's eyes, and he said that everyone was dead. This made the scientists and Kai Yanran's father taken aback. The children's parents became angrier and angrier. They asked where their children were, because 3 days had already passed since the exam. While Kai Yanran's father hugged his daughter, he turned to Tsui-sen. It was a scientist with glasses. He lowered his head guiltily when Kai Yanran's father asked him to explain the situation to them. A guy in an orange suit watched the platform through binoculars. He told his friend Si Shang that the survivors were good for nothing, asking if they were worth waiting for at all. His friend replied that he thought that Genius was studying at this country academy. A guy with pink hair was sitting on the railing. He said that either Qi lied to them, or this guy still died in the initial dungeon. He told Si Shang to go, otherwise his brother would reprimand him if he found out that they came secretly. Someone shouted that a man was coming out of the portal. 2 guys noticed this. It was Ling Chanfeng. He returned. The main character lay unconscious on the platform. The other students and scientists looked at him in horror, suggesting that he could have died. Aji ran up to the guy and told him to hold on. Sui-san said worriedly that they could still save him. Suddenly, Ling Chanfeng opened his eyes and said that he was alive, causing the disciple and scholar to be taken aback. He began to struggle to get up when Aji asked if he had defeated Lu Lion. The main character replied that people cannot cope with this demon. He remembered how his undead drove the demon's scythe into the stone floor. Ling Chanfeng said that he was lucky that the demon had no will of his own, but he could only imprison him in the cave. Concerned, Sui-sen frowned and asked if he had saved the others and if he had undergone the second awakening in the secret realm. He was sitting next to the guy when purple marks appeared in the air around him. Ling Chanfeng leaned forward sharply as he realized something. His eyes opened wide and his pupils constricted. He realized that someone had launched an attack on him. The guy raised his hand above the platform, realizing that it was impossible to summon the undead. He asked the fallen angel what was happening. The spirit replied that after applying the effect of the forbidden demon, the mental power is blocked. Ling Chanfeng stood up abruptly as soon as he heard this. The scientist looked at him in fear. The main character lowered his eyebrows, sweat dripping from his face. He realized that he was under the effect of a forbidden demon. He imagined a crowd of people, not understanding who and why was weaving an intrigue against him. Sui-sen put his hand on the guy's shoulder and asked what happened. Ling Chanfeng replied that nothing happened. He looked down guiltily, realizing that this feeling had suddenly disappeared. The bespectacled scientist frowned and said that he needed to see a doctor, but before that he had to ask the guy a couple of questions. They must explain themselves to the families of the victims. The bright sun illuminated the roofs of brown houses and the crown of trees. Night had fallen. There was a full moon. A bright lantern illuminated the street. Ling Chanfeng put his hands in his pocket and walked along the empty street, thinking that the interrogation was over. He thought that he would be interrogated like the police. Closing his eyes, he remembered how it was. The scientist sat at the table with him. Sui-sen asked if this was the heir of the child of evil, and if there was such a monster in the secret monster. He turned to his colleague and assumed that there was some external force at work within him. Otherwise, a simple 10th level monster would not be capable of such a thing. He was sorry that the secret realm could only be sealed entirely. The main character was sitting in a new t-shirt without a hole in the chest. He looked at the man with glasses and asked if they had any doubt that the story was true. Sui-san replied that no one could lie to the diviner. Go-Hai smiled and laughed. Ling Chanfeng closed his eyes in a relaxed manner, thinking that he was a monarch with powerful spiritual power, and his mind art would not work against him. He was mostly telling the truth, but my intuition tells me that something that emits an aura of necromancy cannot be talked about. He imagined the purple crystal he had seen in the cave. Suddenly someone told him that he had kept himself waiting. The main character turned around, not understanding who it was. A sharp blade rushed towards him. Ling Chanfeng summoned his undead, who protected him with shields. A blue-eyed guy in a black t-shirt radiated magic from his hands. He said that at level 10 he summoned creatures with level 13 attributes, suggesting that he really was not a beginner. His friend was filming the scene, asking if he could defeat a level 10 kid. The guy in the black t-shirt had 2 daggers in his hands, and he began to copy himself. He said that summoning tricks were nothing compared to his skills as a level 13 professional assassin. The army of clones led by the guy ran towards Ling Chanfeng and his undead. However, the summoned creatures instantly dealt with them, piercing them with weapons. Behind him was a blue-eyed guy who asked me to guess who came. The eyes of the main character sparkled. He said that he would not understand why he did not please them, but they chose the wrong enemy. The attacking guy found himself in the darkness, where a pair of red eyes stared at him, making him scared. Someone with ashen hair shouted, ordering him to stop. Ling Chanfeng and his opponent were taken aback and turned around abruptly. The main character seemed confused. His pupils narrowed and his mouth opened slightly. Someone shouted that this was a setup and an ambush. The main character fell to the ground, looking up aggressively. Someone's white shoes were clicking on the road tiles. Next to a man with blonde hair stood a guy with a phone in his hands. The man frowned with displeasure and said that Xing Shang could not deal with a child of the 10th level. Xing Shang looked at Ling Chanfeng's back and said to his brother with blonde hair that this guy is not simple and most likely he is a summoner. The main character began to get angry. He frowned and asked who they were. The white-haired man looked at him coldly and gave his brother a minute to deal with him. Xing Shang jumped to his feet and began to move quickly, saying that with his brother, 30 seconds was enough for him. The main character gritted his teeth and looked at him. The black-haired guy and his copies slashed Ling Chanfeng's body numerous times. He fell, bleeding, and felt that his body was numb. He was surprised that the guy was able to exorcise the demons, but his body and mind were not in the best condition. Ling Chanfeng decided to summon the spirit and moved into the body of the undead. His bright yellow eyes glowed brightly from under his hood. Xing Shang, holding daggers in his hands, looked madly at the main character. There was a blue glow around him. It was the effect of a forbidden demon. While in the body of the undead, he looked to the side. He suggested that this is a sealing magical effect and necromancers can see things that are inaccessible to people. Suddenly, he saw that the blonde man's eyes were as blue as the aura around him. He realized that his ability was activated by his eyes. Something hit a street lamp hanging on a building. The undead waved its bony hand. The guy with the phone in his hands was taken aback, and the blonde man's face frowned. The main character ended up behind Xing Shang, which surprised him, and said that he shouldn't be in his field of vision. The black-haired guy started waving his knives in a panic, not understanding why Ling Chanfeng was still on his feet, because he should have died from his wounds. The undead with red glowing eyes swung his spear, saying that now it was his turn. He decided to start with the leader and pointed his weapon at the blonde man. Suddenly a blue barrier appeared around his head and the spear missed him. He smiled and said that he was the first one who saw through his abilities so quickly. However, he believed that Ling Chanfeng should have run away better. The main character clenched his teeth and asked displeasedly what he meant. A guy with a phone in his hand began to take pictures of the blonde man and said that he had a defense level of 30 and an ordinary summoner of the 10th level could not break through it. A smug grin appeared on the man's face and he told Ling Chanfeng that he didn't want this, but now he changed his mind. He blamed the main character for waking up a second time. The guy frowned, lowering the corners of his lips. He understood that his power was comparable to that of a necromancer under the mantle of a monarch. The guy assumed that his eyes would soon get used to the darkness, and if he used the sealing ability, it would be the end. The blonde man picked up the phone, carefully reading something. His brother texted him saying they should meet within the hour. The man said that fortunately the boys were leaving. Xing Shang approached him and asked why. The man put the phone in his inner pocket. He said that his brother found out that they returned without asking. They have to go to Mount Zishan now. This time Hua Xing is not joking. The guy in the orange tracksuit asked if they needed his abilities and why they were treating him like that. They rudely told him to turn on his brain. An angry Ling Chanfeng looked at them silently, feeling dissatisfied. Next to him, his undead hovered above the road. The man's retinue turned to look at him. The blonde man himself shouted that he would let the guy go, but threatened that next time no one would interfere with them. Shanghai Branch Administration Bureau. Near the 5-story building, there was a parking lot where police cars were parked. Sui-san said he was trying his best to reassure the families. He was sitting at a table with a blue folder on it and talking on the phone. He asked his interlocutor what he should do with the secret kingdom, since there are many ambiguities there and cannot be left to chance. The interlocutor replied that if this were so, then people would have faced this problem a long time ago. Sui-san replied that the current pros are not comparable to the past ones. He asked if it wasn't so easy to dramatize an age-old story. The interlocutor loudly shouted that respect is the key to the survival of humanity and threatened that if he jokes with him, the administration will find a replacement for him. Sui-san removed the phone from his ear due to the loud screaming and replied that he understood. The interlocutor asked what he learned about the 5 survivors. The scientist looked at the screen in surprise, remembering this. It was night. The lights were on in the administration building. Sui-san replied that one of the newcomers almost immediately rose to level 10 and compared to him. The Daochin region under his jurisdiction is Baby Talk. Ling Chanfeng House. He lived in a brick apartment complex. The bony hand held a purple crystal. The main character thought that this was not just like that, and the point of view of the necromancers was his true appearance. While the guy was sitting on the bed, his soul was inside the summoned creature with a crystal in his hands. He knew that Sui-sen had previously been skeptical that level 10 summoners could seal secret realms. He assumed that the stone was to blame. A sword began to appear in the hands of the undead. The main character felt that an aura was emanating from the stone, similar to the aura of a necromancer, but he did not know whether he would be able to activate this thing. He swung his sword and hit the crystal with all his might. The blade and the stone touched, and there was a shock wave all around. Ling Chanfeng, in the body of an undead, dropped his sword and grabbed his hand, which hurt after the blow. A stone with a black aura lay on the wooden floor. It didn't even move. The guy got out of bed, and 3 summoned creatures surrounded the purple stone. He frowned in concentration and cast the monarch's blessing. A loud crash sounded in his apartment. A neighbor from the apartment below leaned out of his window and started complaining about the noise in the middle of the night. Ling Chanfeng lay down on the bed, looking at the stone in his hands. Even the power of the 3 undead creatures blessed with the power of the monarch did not cause any damage. He wondered what the crystal was made of. Spells from books, proven over centuries, are completely useless. The main character assumed that he was still weak and his level and abilities were not enough. He looked sadly at the ceiling, pursing his lips. Summoning 3 creatures was his limit, but he decided to return to this issue later. Ling Chanfeng glanced at the vibrating phone on the bedside table. He picked up the phone and answered the call. He received a call from Sui-san, standing near the window with a cup of coffee in his hands. He said that there was information on his question yesterday. Recently, people from Huakin University came to the Zishan Martial Arts District in Shanghai. The scientist's face became more serious, and he said that they had come to the Golden Scroll game. The main character frowned excitedly while sitting on the bed and asked what it was and whether the participants would be from Huakin. Sui-san looked at the starry sky. He replied that this was a Huakin Association competition. As a rule, their core members participate, and their national coverage is unlimited. Players at the highest levels compete for the Golden Scroll. He asked why the guy was asking. Thinking about this information, Ling Chanfeng frowned. He stated with a serious expression that he was going to Zishan. It was a mountainous area among forests. Sui-sen shouted that Zishan was an area of at least level 15, and asked if the guy even thought. The station building was made in gray colors, and there was a clock on the roof. Ling Chanfeng was wearing a sports uniform. He said that people come here to escape this city. He remembered how the angry Sui-san pointed his finger at him. He said that if the guy intends to go, he must fulfill his request, otherwise he may not wait for his help. The main character looked at the passengers without interest. He walked among the crowd with his hands in his pockets and said that he needed to find a man in a cowboy hat. Although he was comfortable alone, he doesn't have a passport yet. He couldn't buy a ticket to Zishan, so he had to make a promise. The back of the head of a man in a red cowboy hat appeared. Someone called out to him, calling him Uncle TZI. A girl with blonde hair waved at him, getting his attention. 3 more people, besides the girl, immediately stood around TZI. He was told that he did not say that this time the order would be larger. The blonde said he could tell them. TZI had purple eyes. He raised his finger and promised that this was the largest order since their team began helping in the search for crystals, but they needed one more person. The guy in the cap frowned and reminded that his uncle himself said that if they want to take a person to the team, resources are distributed differently. TZI looked at him calmly and replied that a level 10 kid would not bring anything useful, so there was no need to give him anything. The man with sideburns looked at him suspiciously and asked him to explain why he would take someone of the 10th level right away. TZI showed 3 fingers and replied that the official had given orders to transport this child safe and sound. Then, the official must buy the mine at 30% higher than the market value. The blonde was very surprised by this. The man with sideburns contemptuously asked if the child was related to the official. The guy in the cap unhappily adjusted his sleeves and shouted that he was against it. He said that this is Zishan, and protecting a 10th level brat is tantamount to facing 2 15th level beasts. TZI raised his hands with a grin and told him to calm down. He said that if it were a quiet time, he would not have agreed, but this time the strategy is different. Ling Chanfeng approached their company. He asked if they were the same crystal hunters who were going to Zishan. TZI smiled and put his hand on his shoulder, introducing himself and answering affirmatively. He asked the guy's name, and he said his name. As soon as the guy in the cap heard his name, his eyes lit up. He asked if the guy was the young master who joined them to see life. The main character frowned and a blue glow appeared around him. Several system windows have appeared. The impact of an illusory effect has been detected. Sacredness of the monarch automatically makes you invulnerable to spiritual attacks. Ling Chanfeng began to dispel that blue glow. He replied that he was simply learning from his predecessors. Suddenly, the eyes of the guy in the cap turned red. He jerked sharply. His allies drew attention to him. Uncle TZI handed the ticket to Ling Chanfeng, and the guy in the cap looked at it with displeasure, realizing that he was not so simple. The main character, with a calm face, thought that someone didn't want him to join. He decided to find an excuse and sneak away for a while. Uncle TZI put his arm around his shoulder and laughed, saying that studying is good. The rest of the group walked ahead. One of them told Ling Chanfeng that when they get to Miss Han, he needs to follow them obediently and not get in the way. The sun was high in the sky, illuminating the mountains and forests. Magic crystals are the main materials for creating weapons and pharmaceutical research. Also, crystals of various properties are in great demand and have a high price, because only creatures of level 15 and above have them. A portal appeared not far from the trees with green foliage. Regular pros cannot get crystals, they can only give more experienced ones a chance. Crystal hunters are a raiding group that specializes in hunting the crystal cores of creatures. There was a slight haze over the mountains. Uncle TZI and his team came out of the portal. The last to emerge was Ling Chanfeng. He looked at the man and asked where they were going. Uncle TZI closed his eyes and replied that they usually take their time looking for creatures, but not this time. He put his hands to his chin and said that he had received information that there was one golden creature in Zishan who was seriously injured. The guys from his team were taken aback, looking at him in surprise. Ling Chanfeng didn't understand what the value of the golden creature was, and the girl looked at him and asked if he knew. She imagined space in which several black stones and one large golden stone hovered. The girl snapped her finger and said that ordinary creatures have black crystal cores, and some rare ones have golden ones. That's why they are called golden. A golden creature has a very high chance of dropping a golden scroll. The main character frowned, mouth parted. He realized that this was the golden scroll that Sui-san was talking about. He decided to go with them in order to have a high chance of meeting Hua Xing's people. The guy in the green jacket was taken aback. The guy in the brown shirt said they could sell the crystal at auction for tens of millions. A man with sideburns named Yan asked TZI where the information came from. He crossed his arms and asked if he really wanted to miss this opportunity because he was being overly cautious. Uncle TZI hugged Ling Chanfeng and admitted that he took this guy because of the golden scroll. They really need the scroll, and it has already found a buyer, an official. Yan looked at this in disbelief, but did not answer. The main character felt that everything was not so simple. The sun illuminated the green grass. The team of hunters decided to hit the road, rejoicing in this. White clouds floated across the sky, and someone shouted that everything was not so simple. Uncle TZI stroked the feathers of a huge bird that resembled an eagle. The bird leaned towards the man, and he stroked its beak. He said that this time their target is a blue-faced viper. Ling Chanfeng took a look at him and realized that he was also a summoner. Hearing about the viper, the other hunters looked at the man with wide eyes. Yan put his hand to his chin and said that this is indeed a rare golden beast. Uncle TZI looked at his bird and said that he personally checked everything, and he was sure that they were doing well this time. He said that the worst thing about this viper is the infrasound hallucinogen. People will not be able to come close to her, even if they are mortally wounded, and his bird knows how to hold back this wave. The guy in the brown shirt was happy and said that now he can buy himself a game console. His friend told him to calm down and suggested he better buy some combat gear. The girl dreamily put her palms together. She said she would help her parents with their business so they wouldn't have to work so much anymore. Ling Chanfeng raised his hand and wanted to ask something, but the guys immediately said that he was not entitled to a share. The main character grinned and asked when they were leaving. He himself thought that these two guys were terribly infuriating him. Uncle TZI turned to him and warned him that hunting creatures was not child's play. A real fight is not like in the stories of old men, so he ordered to obey him from now on. Ling Chanfeng looked at him seriously and replied that he understood everything. The man jumped on his bird and told the others to do the same. They would get there by air without any problems. All the hunters mounted the hawk and flew over the forest. A mechanical lizard emerged from the bushes. His eyes reflected the bird and the hunters. The unknown person felt that 2 were level 17, 3 were level 15. Someone had a sphere on the table in which the hunters could be seen. An unknown person asked why one had such a low level. He said that the meat of a weakling is also meat and laughed. As soon as TZI saw his destination, he smiled. The mountains were shrouded in dense forests. There was a deep hole there, near which they flew and prepared to land. The bird sat on the edge of the cliff, spreading its wings wide. TZI turned to the guy in the cap and asked if he took the rope. As soon as he heard the answer in the affirmative, he told everyone to climb down the rope. He warned everyone to be ready to fight at any moment. They began to climb down into the hole. TZI told Ling Chanfeng that before the final boss he needed to get rid of small animals, of which there are at least 100. He warned that they would not be able to take care of the guy, so he asked him to wait for them upstairs, and then he would go down to them as soon as they finished. The main character agreed. Suddenly his pupils constricted. He was taken aback. In his inventory, the stone began to become covered with a black aura. Ling Chanfeng looked back and felt as if the stone had a reaction. There was a light fog in the deep hole. The end of the gorge was dark. It was impossible to see anything there. Small snakes swirled around the stalactites, and the blue scales of a huge monster appeared behind. He had green glowing eyes. The sneaker of one of the hunters slid down. He grabbed the rope tightly, saying that there were too few places for camp. A shadow appeared behind him. The guy turned around, noticing something strange. His friend looked at him on his way down and asked what was the matter. The hunter in the brown shirt decided that it was his imagination. They continued to descend further as the summoned creature Ling Chanfeng looked at them. He shifted back into the undead body, looking at them with yellow eyes. The main character understood that the stone would not react in vain, and something was clearly wrong here. All the hunters went down into the deep cave, their ropes hanging behind them. They began to walk one after another through the narrow passages. They carefully descended deeper and deeper. Suddenly Yan stopped abruptly. He raised his fist, ordering everyone else to stop. Green snakes crawled along the stone walls and stalactites, which surprised and frightened them. Yan said that blue-green eyes are a sign of blue-faced vipers. The team stopped talking to each other. According to them, the snakes were level 10 and they were guards. Somewhere nearby there was a female. The guy in the green shirt added that usually the level of guard snakes is from 12 to 14. Their level depends on the condition of the female. Yan grinned and turned to Uncle TZI, saying that his information was correct. His deal was indeed a good one. The man smiled back at him and told him not to rejoice too early. He said that even if the female is weak, their beast is level 20. As soon as the snakes began to hiss at them, Yan ordered everyone to take up weapons and prepare for battle. Uncle TZI hit the ground with his hand. A yellow light appeared. The birds he summoned immediately began to attack the snakes. The young hunters prepared their weapons and began to advance. The fierce battle was observed by Ling Chanfeng in the body of an undead. While he looked there from under the hood, he remembered that small snakes have nothing but their breath. Looking at one of the snakes, he clearly sensed energy fluctuations. Killed snakes lay among the hunter's feet. The main character knew that usually once a snake's head is cut off, its body should evaporate. His yellow pupils shrank when he realized that the snakes had not disappeared throughout the entire battle. The neck of one of the snakes began to swell. The battlefield filled with green gas, significantly reducing visibility for the hunters. TZI covered his face and closed one eye, not understanding what happened. The guy in the cap turned to the support and asked where to use her strength. The girl looked at her hands and replied that she did not know. A grimace of horror appeared on her face, and she shouted that her abilities were no longer there. Yan grabbed his neck, starting to cough up blood. He asked how this happened, and if the vipers had any surprises. The green scaly-skinned viper hissed. The snake smiled and asked TZI, who was trying to catch his breath, if he was satisfied with the information from him. The man was taken aback and looked at him in shock. He asked if he had made this poisonous mist and shouted that he had paid generously. The viper opened its mouth wide and laughed. He said that TZI would go blind with the desire to get the scroll, and he wasn't even bothered by the scant information. The snake wriggled and stuck out its tongue. He stated that he is a hunter. Ling Chanfeng's eyes opened wide, and he wondered if this creature was hunting people. Breathing heavily, Uncle TZI asked to let them go and said that they would rather take his life. A mechanical lizard began to crawl out of the viper's mouth. He said that he did not have such a chance. Everything in the cave began to shake. The hunters did not understand what was happening. A huge snake was crawling through the tunnels. The mechanical lizard opened its toothy mouth. He declared that the guardian snakes had been defeated and the Snake King had awakened. He said there would be a fair fight between the wounded boss and the poisoned hunters. He crawled up to the frightened girl and said that if she was ready to become his healer, he would save her. The guy in the cap hit the lizard with a sword. The lizard shouted that they would see each other in an hour. The man in the black hood smiled and laughed. He laughed and said he hoped he would make it by then. This man was sitting near the cliff. He stated that in a conflict between two sides, the benefit goes to the third party, and he will take the golden scroll and the hunter's money. The wind was blowing around him, and there were trees nearby. The man said that he doesn't know where the boy went, but he's still level 10. At this time, the main character was hiding behind a high stone. He was not far from the man he was eavesdropping on. An unknown man was lying on a sun lounger under a beach umbrella. He put his hands behind his head. There was lemonade next to him. He said that he would wait until the prey killed itself, and he could collect all the rewards. The phone on his chest began to glow. He looked at the screen and asked how the guy was doing. The interlocutor asked the poisonous lizard, the guy on the sun lounger, what he had done. He replied that it was just a job and asked why he should care. The interlocutor said that usually he does whatever he wants, but now their goal is the people of Huaking, the International Assembly. The interlocutor shouted that the success of the plan depends on the poisonous lizard, and he gives him freedom. The guy replied that what happened was the work of some amateurs and that little happens by chance. He was still being followed by Ling Chanfeng. The main character looked ahead thoughtfully, realizing that they were interested in Huaking. The poisonous snake held the phone above itself. He shouted to his interlocutor that he had joined the organization 6 months earlier than him, and sooner or later he would die. He heard that there is another team in Huaking, and they have a little girl. Ling Chanfeng tensed when he heard this and frowned. He assumed he was a pervert. He jerked his leg, making a noise. The poison lizard frowned and turned around when he heard the noise. The main character was taken aback and panicked. He realized that he had been noticed. An explosion thundered, a column of dust rose and cobblestones flew up. The poisonous lizard grinned disgustingly and said that he had found it. Ling Chanfeng was lying on the ground. His clothes were dirty. Several system windows have appeared. You have suffered a decisive blow at the will of the monarch. Your undead are dead. As a reminder, an undead monarch with an unbreakable will still loses most points of psychological value with each death. If you continue to stress your body, you will lose your mind. Ling Chanfeng gritted his teeth, realizing that the enemy had killed 5 creatures he had summoned. The poisonous lizard began to approach him and asked why they didn't take him with them. He started laughing at his low level. The protagonist no longer had any doubt that this was the most terrible opponent he had faced. The poisonous lizard smiled arrogantly and pointed his finger back. He said that the guy was free because he was not interested in people of the 10th level. He placed his hands on his hips as Ling Chanfeng rose to his feet. The main character did not understand why he spared him. The enemy grinned, his red eyes glowing brightly. Suddenly the ground began to shake underfoot. A huge mechanical lizard appeared from there. Ling Chanfeng hit the monster's tooth. The main character fell into the monster's mouth. The poisonous lizard began to laugh evilly. He shouted that the guy was naive for believing him. The jaws of the mechanical monster closed loudly. The enemy shouted that when he turned around, he had already shown his vulnerability. The poisonous lizard began to jump for joy. The mechanical monster was huge. The guy with the red eyes said that when he hit with full force, the kid started to seem like an ordinary person. He assumed that he had an advanced item that needed to be picked up. Standing next to his monster, the poison lizard turned around and said that there were still prey left in the cave. An undead hid behind a tree, into whose body Ling Chanfeng moved. He narrowed his eyes, and he assumed that the enemy thought he was dead. At this time, the real body of the protagonist was hidden in the mechanisms. Several system windows appeared. The scan was successful. Object mechanical lizard. The spiritual control system can take over the control of any inanimate object. The object's state is stable. Should we seize control? Ling Chanfeng, while inside the lizard, decided to begin the capture. The mechanical lizard's eyes suddenly turned yellow. Having captured the monster's body, he stood next to the poison lizard, and now the prey became the hunter. Shaking began again inside the cave. The blue-faced viper forgot to be imprisoned in the barrier. The hunters tried their best. They shouted that they did not have a strong player. They can only try to wear down the boss. The viper began to hit the walls of the barrier and hiss. The girl tried her best to maintain the barrier, but she said she couldn't do it anymore. Her teammate replied that there was simply no end to the boss's attacks, and that he too would soon give up. The guy in the cap held on with all his strength. He gritted his teeth and said that if it weren't for the poisonous mist, they wouldn't be so weak. A crack appeared on the blue barrier where the viper was trapped. Suddenly the barrier fell and the viper hissed loudly. Yan fell from the shock wave. He closed his eyes and began coughing up blood, saying that this was the end. Wings with brown feathers flapped. Uncle TZI shouted that he brought them here, and therefore would get them out of here. He had wings behind him, and he flew straight towards the viper, ordering him to fight him. This made Yan worried and taken aback. TZI flew straight into the mouth of a huge monster. The young hunters were horrified. The undead appeared behind them. A red beam pierced the viper's throat, causing everyone to be taken aback. Yellow lightning appeared in the darkness. The snake's entire body was shocked, and the monster rolled its eyes. Ling Chanfeng, in an undead body, held TZI in his hands. The hunters ran up to the monster lying on the ground and shouted that the boss was dead. They did not understand what happened because some shadow pierced the throat of the beast. The wounded Uncle TZI looked at his savior and said that he was a summoner. He assumed that he was not a beast and was also a summoner. He asked how long he had been here, what relation he had to that hunter, and why he saved him. Ling Chanfeng's yellow eyes narrowed, and he didn't say anything. The main character put the man on the ground, not understanding why he was talking to him, because summoners cannot communicate at a distance. TZI had bruises and bruises on his face. The main character asked if there were any thunder pearls left. The man was taken aback by this and turned to the undead in a state of shock, asking whether he was a summoner or a mechanical creature. Ling Chanfeng replied that he only needed to know that he was on his side, and if he wanted to answer his question. The rest of the hunters pointed at them. The guy shouted that Uncle TZI was alive. Yan looked at the undead, realizing that it was it that killed the blue-faced viper. The captain frowned and looked at Ling Chanfeng. He said that the Thunder Pearl was used to kill the boss and asked what they should do. The main character replied that there was another enemy upstairs. The man made a serious face and replied that this weapon is lethal to internal organs, but will hardly touch the outer shell. The enemy will have to be forced to swallow it. Ling Chanfeng in the undead body looked back and shouted that someone was coming. The cave plunged into a red light and an eerie voice said that he was already coming. The team was taken aback and everyone frowned, realizing that a hunter was coming. A poisonous viper was walking through the cave. He was surprised that everyone was alive and not even out of breath. The team of hunters looked warily at the approaching man. The guy raised his hands and was surprised that they won. He said that because of them, he lost a level 20 beast. Ling Chanfeng, in an undead body, watched him from hiding. Behind the poison lizard was a mechanical monster. The enemy said that the golden scroll did not fall out, but was glad that the crystals had a high price. He immediately went to the pile of golden stones. A guy in a cap ran towards him. The poison lizard grinned smugly and ordered the mechanical beast to kill him. The enemy looked at his animal, not understanding why he did not move. The poison lizard raised his hand using magic. The yellow beam was aimed at the guy who was collecting crystals. There was an explosion, throwing the guy in the cap and the crystals back. He fell heavily near his allies. The enemy picked up one crystal from the ground, asking him how he could take other people's things. He looked at the golden stone and laughed, calling the guy a thief. Suddenly, the mechanical lizard's paw began to move. The enemy was surprised and turned to him. The mechanical lizard hit the ground. The poison lizard was able to dodge. Behind him, Ling Chanfeng appeared in an undead body. He swung his scythe while the enemy was confused. A blow was struck on his back, which made the enemy taken aback. He fell to his knees, clutching his back, and asked who he was. The main character put his scythe on his shoulders and replied that he was his death. The poison lizard was breathing heavily as he looked at him. The entire hunting team looked at him angrily, saying that circumstances had changed. The enemy clenched his teeth in displeasure and offered to talk and discuss everything. Suddenly, he brought the crystal to his face and shouted that it would torture him slowly and he would beg for death. Uncle Tzi's eyes widened, as did Yan, and shouted that this rare crystal instantly replenishes strength. The poisonous lizard began to consume the crystal and shouted that his relics were enough to make up for everything he had lost. Ling Chanfeng narrowed his eyes and stated that it was not a magic crystal that he had absorbed. He asked where such joy came from. Suddenly, the enemy felt sick and shuddered. A bright yellow light appeared from his chest, and he fell to the floor, not understanding what was happening. Before this happened, TZI looked at the undead in shock and tried to figure out how he wanted to use the Thunder Pearl on the hunter. He began to explain that this was almost impossible to do. Ling Chanfeng looked away and replied that he had a way, but would need their help. He also knew that they had someone on their team who could create illusions. The man opened his eyes wide, realizing what he wanted to say. The poison lizard's body was electrocuted from the inside. He fell unconscious on the floor, and smoke came out of his mouth. Uncle TZI looked at it in surprise and said that everything worked out. The guy in the green cap sat down on the ground and said that he couldn't stand another fight. The girl sank to the ground and said that she could barely stand on her feet. The main character narrowed his eyes and advised everyone to leave here because the organization was behind him. It is unknown when they will come to search. The guy in the green jacket immediately began to express dissatisfaction, taking a step forward. He said they should search the boss's lair. Yan put his hand on his shoulder and said that he had to leave. The guy looked at the others and said that there was definitely treasure left in the boss's lair and this hunter. Yan helped the guy get up and replied that now we need to focus on saving their lives. Everyone is very weak, and now is not the time to look for treasures. Ling Chanfeng in the undead body was watching them. Yan put his hand on the shoulder of the guy in the cap and said that the undead saved them and they would leave the treasure to him. He reminded that they have expensive magic crystals. He also asked if he thought they could, in their condition, match his strength and ingenuity. The guy in the cap lowered his head, closed his eyes, and agreed. As the hunters passed by the mechanical lizard, the guy in the cap turned around and asked Ling Chanfeng how he knew about his illusory abilities. The main character narrowed his eyes and replied that he taught these abilities. His answer made the guy scared and taken aback. He began to mutter something. After a while, Ling Chanfeng cut the head of the mechanical lizard. The main character's real body was released. He moved there and began to stretch his hands while the undead nodded to him. Ling Chanfeng looked at the unconscious opponent and noticed that he looked different. He had a completely different appearance and hair color. Several system windows appeared. Scanning completed successfully. Target item, camouflage robe. Changes the owner's appearance and voice. The professional is dead. A valuable item has been discovered in the enemy's inventory. Want to receive an item? The main character immediately raised his glowing hand over the corpse, answering in the affirmative. Using magic, he took items from the hunter. He received a robe, money, medicine, and a skill book. The last thing interested him. With a surprised face, he asked what it was. Several system windows have appeared. There is another way for professionals to gain skills, in addition to leveling up. Through the skill book. Skill books appear from treasure scrolls. Ling Chanfeng frowned at the information window and asked what treasure scrolls were. Several system ones have appeared. Rare monsters of gold level and higher have a chance of dropping treasure scrolls of the corresponding level upon death. Using treasure scrolls, you can open skill books, experience books, rare materials, treasure maps, and other valuables. Ling Chanfeng smiled relaxedly and said that the golden scrolls were actually golden treasure scrolls. In addition, there are rarer monsters than gold rank. Several system windows have appeared. The rank of a monster depends on its pedigree. In the current world, 75% of monsters have common blood, 20% have gold blood, and only 5% have rarer blood. The main character, looking at the system window with the characteristics of the scroll, asked why this skill book was a silver rank. A system window has appeared. The golden treasure scroll is a scroll that, when opened, can reveal a gold level treasure. Ling Chanfeng closed his eyes dissatisfied and sighed, saying that this skill book is only part of the golden treasure. Several system windows have appeared. Skill type treasures are growth treasures. They have the lowest probability of obtaining among all treasures. Even though it is a silver rank, if you obtain a combat skill, it will be worth as much as a whole gold treasure. If you get an impractical skill, it will cost less than a silver one. Ling Chanfeng thoughtfully put his hand to his lips, realizing that he had to choose the best or the worst. Not a single muscle on his face moved, and he decided to open. He received a new skill, Cutting the Darkness. A successful adaptation of the skill occurred. A system window has appeared. Cut of Darkness, level 12, effect. The ability of the Necromancer to dissolve in the darkness. It is impossible to notice him, after which he can deliver a sudden blow. Ling Chanfeng couldn't believe that he immediately obtained a level 12 skill. However, this is an initial level. It is possible to increase it with the help of effect books. The main character closed his eyes, raised his head, and replied that at the moment he still could not use level 12. Something like a skill book is too far from it. The purple crystal in his inventory began to react again. A purple aura hovered in the dark cave. Ling Chanfeng looked deep and wondered if there was still something good in the snake pit. In the cave lay a huge green egg that glowed. The main character, holding a crystal in his hands, said that this was a snake egg and the reason for the weakness of the golden monster was not injuries, but that the egg was drawing energy from the mother. The purple stone in his hands moved forward. The crystal flew up to the egg and became covered in a blue aura. A system window appeared. You have already reached a sufficient amount of experience. Your level has increased to 11. Ling Chanfeng was taken aback. his pupils narrowed, and he asked if the stone absorbs energy and if it can convert this energy into experience. Several system windows have appeared. You have already reached a sufficient amount of experience. Your level has increased to 12. The skill to cut the darkness is unlocked. Suddenly, the energy from the egg threw the guy back. He landed deftly and looked ahead in alarm. Everything around began to tremble. The crystal continued to absorb energy. Ling Chanfeng said that the egg is resisting the stone and the cave is collapsing. He needs to leave here. He jumped forward and grabbed the crystal, saying that he could raise another level, but it wouldn't work. While the main character was grabbing the crystal, he was lifted into the air. He tried with all his might to move the crystal, but he failed. Ling Chanfeng frowned angrily. He told the crystal with annoyance that it dared to absorb energy only if he allowed it. He asked how he dares to contradict him. A column of thick smoke rose around the cave. The main character shouted that he was the Lord of the Undead. The cave began to collapse, and thick smoke mixed with dust poured out. A girl with blue eyes and green hair said that someone had come. She was tied with rope and could not move. The girl turned around and said that someone had come to save her. Two bandits looked at her. It was a guy with blonde hair and a girl with short hair. The guy looked rudely at the tied-up girl and ordered her to stop, because even ghosts don't live in this wilderness. The girl with a short haircut grinned and said that even if someone was ready to save, she would be the first to be saved. The guy pointed at himself and told her that she was talking like he was a scoundrel. The girl with short hair replied that he was the villain who stole her heart. The tied-up girl looked at them with disgust and said that they made her sick. At this time, a poisonous lizard passed behind them. As soon as the couple heard footsteps, they tensed up and ordered him not to interfere. The short-haired girl had a sword in her hands. The girl with green hair began to smile joyfully and shout that she had said that her friend would come and save her. She told Poison Lizard that if they worked together, they could easily take down these two. The guy's silhouette became smaller and smaller. He moved on, leaving the three at a loss. As he walked further, the tied-up girl shouted after him, asking where he was going. The bandits laughed at him and said that he was just a passerby and ordered him to leave. While the Poison Lizard stood with his back to them, the bound girl asked if he could hear her ghostly voice. She said that she was from Chunhua High School and he must have heard about it. She asked to help her once, saying that she would not remain in debt. She was again surrounded by aggressive bandits and ordered to give them her things. The frightened girl said that she came here with Huaking University and asked if they were afraid of the consequences. The bandits said that Mount Zishan was so huge that they would never be found if they hid in the thicket. Suddenly, the Poison Lizard turned to them and asked the girl if she knew people from Huaking University. The bandits looked scared. They looked at him aggressively, and the girl with green hair smiled relaxedly. She answered in the affirmative and said that the second largest association in Huaking sent a raiding party to Zishan. They need her ghost communication ability, so she is part of the raiding party. She also said that for some reason she was away, and if he helps her, she will introduce him to them. The girl jumped up happily and said that he would have to kill these two first. The bandits readied their weapons as they looked at the Poison Lizard. The guy with blonde hair and the girl with short hair looked at their opponent with mockery. The bandit asked the tied-up girl if she hoped he would help her. The short-haired girl stuck out her tongue and pressed herself against the bound girl. She said that if the hostage gave them her things, they would not bother her. Suddenly, a ghostly green face appeared in front of the villainess. As soon as the green aura appeared, Poison Lizard turned around. The girl with green hair was so angry that her face even turned red. The bandits shouted that she was escaping even while tied up, and after a day of running, her strength was almost gone. The poisonous lizard turned around with interest, not understanding what this ability was. The bandits turned into werewolves. The girl crossed her arms and said that she had already marked her scent, and no matter where she teleported, she would still find her. Her ally replied that she first needed to get rid of the obstacle. The poisonous lizard frowned and was surprised at what he saw. The green-haired girl gritted her teeth and said that they were level 16 beastmen. She said that in the guise of animals, their characteristics of strength, speed, and smell increased significantly. The male werewolf attacked the poison lizard, threatening him. Suddenly, an undead creature appeared in front of the poison lizard. The werewolf opened his eyes wide in shock. The undead hit the enemy with an axe. pushing him away from him. Apparently, Ling Chanfeng used transformation. Standing in front of him was his level 13 undead. His opponents called him a lowly level 12 summoner. They started insulting him and laughing at him. A grin appeared on the protagonist's face, and he asked if a dog could come to Zishin. Then why couldn't he? He ordered to attack him. The werewolf began to get angry. He opened his fanged mouth and shouted that the guy was finished. The girl with green hair was taken aback and asked why he was making him angry. Ling Chanfeng frowned, knowing that he would be trying out new skills. The werewolf's clothes were torn and his eyes turned red. The girl with green hair tensed and shouted that this was the second enhancement and his abilities had reached level 18. She ordered the main character not to fight him, because he will last a maximum of 3 minutes. They must detain him. Ling Chanfeng sent his hand forward, and the undead flew towards the enemy. The main character smiled self-confidently and said that he also did not use all his powers. The undead swung his axe, sparks coming from his eyes. The summoned creature hit the werewolf, who covered his face with his hands. The lycanthrope opened its mouth slightly, breathing heavily. He didn't understand how a level 13 summon could be so powerful. His pupil constricted greatly and he frowned. He felt another murderous aura. The werewolf jumped back, pushing the undead away from him. His girlfriend approached the lycanthrope. She angrily asked why a level 13 summoner was fighting him on equal terms. The werewolf frowned, not understanding where the murderous aura came from. He looked at the tied-up girl and realized that the aura was not coming from her. Then, he looked at the main character, who also did not emit this aura. The enemy looked at the undead with an axe in his hands. The aura didn't come from him either. The werewolf clenched his teeth and began to sweat. For many years on Zishin, they managed to avoid death every time thanks to the sensing of the wolf. He had only seen one undead and didn't understand why he felt 2 killing auras. His red eye looked around. He didn't understand if there was a second undead. Ling Chanfeng in the form of Poison Lizard smiled. He told the werewolf that if he didn't attack, he would. The lycanthrope bared his teeth and looked at the guy aggressively. An undead with an axe was flying towards him. He was at a loss. The enemy knew that something had to be done, asking himself what would happen to his sister if he died. He looked at the flying undead with hostility, deciding that the only thing left to do was to use it. The guy turned into a human again and bowed deeply, saying that he was giving up. The green hair girl and Ling Chanfeng looked at him in surprise. The enemy's sister is still in the form of a werewolf. She was taken aback. The guy with blonde hair had a face flushed with shame. He said that they say that they are a couple of Zishin evil spirits, but in fact they have never engaged in serious robbery and murder. It is all a bluff. His sister looked at him angrily and asked why he was telling all this. The bandit admitted that the 2 of them were level 16, and they were nobodies in Zishin, asking if they had met today. Ling Chanfeng approached him and said that they had just planned to kill the man and take the treasure. The robber was taken aback and said that the green-haired girl had robbed them, and they had been chasing her all this way to return the treasure. The main character turned to the girl. She pouted her lips and began to make excuses that they had a terrible reputation and she had done a good deed. The werewolf's sister glared at her brother and said that he was a level 18 awakened wolf who had submitted to a level 13 professional. She stated that in the future they should rename themselves the Zishin Mountain Pair of Panties. The guy awkwardly pointed a finger at himself and replied that the one who takes into account the course of events is wise, and suggested calling himself a pair of Zishin talents. His sister decided to deal with the undead, but the guy stopped her and asked her not to do anything stupid. The undead looked menacing while holding an axe. The bandit felt the same murderous aura again. His eyebrows rose and the pupils of his eyes shrank. He continued to stop his sister from fighting and noticed that something was wrong with the shadow. He threw a bag of money to Ling Chanfeng and the others. He quickly ran away, grabbed his sister, and shouted that according to the law of the streets, one cannot kill if they have been paid. There were 200,000 in the bag. The undead picked up the bag of gold and handed it to Ling Chanfeng. The girl ordered him to catch up with them, otherwise they would leave. The main character asked about the law of the street. The girl shouted that there was no such law, and she asked if he would leave them behind for only 200,000. The girl looked at him slightly confused. Ling Chanfeng told her not to chase after a cornered opponent. because she doesn't know what trump cards he has hidden. The main character took off the hood from his head, and his usual appearance returned to him. He recalled that the girl agreed to reveal information about Huaking University to him. The girl widened her eyes in surprise and asked if this was really his appearance. Ling Chanfeng began to untie the rope that was immobilizing the girl. He replied that this robe can change appearance, and he himself is a student like her. The girl massaged her hands and asked if he was a student at Chunhua Middle School. She said that she had not heard of a class-changed summoner showing up in Chunhua. The main character replied that although Chunhua Middle School is the strongest, it is not the only one. Besides, he only recently changed classes. The girl looked at him in disbelief, closing one eye, and called the guy a liar. She said it was impossible for an ordinary professional who had recently changed classes to reach such a level. Suddenly, she opened her eyes wide, realizing something. She remembered standing in the city square wearing a cap and asked if the guy from Daechang who had awakened for the second time was. Ling Chanfeng raised his eyebrows and asked if she knew him. The girl put her hand to her chin and grinned. She looked away, pursing her lips. She knew that if Ling Chanfeng found out that she was using him as a shield, then she would be finished. She didn't know if Xing Sheng was bothering him. The main character looked at her seriously and said that in this case, there should be no questions about his identity. He asked her to be taken to the people from Huaking University. The girl raised her finger up and told him not to rush. She asked if he was interested in what kind of treasure the bandits were trying to take away. The guy answered negatively. The girl began to get angry and pointed her finger at him, asking why he was not interested in the treasure. Ling Chanfeng replied that he was only interested in one treasure, but he didn't think she would give it to her. Besides, he was only interested in Huaking. The girl raised the scroll into the air and declared that this was a legendary treasure map, and that with its help you could find the entrance to a natural cache. She imagined an explorer in a cave with many treasures. The girl said that this is different from the testing dungeons controlled by people. These secret dungeons are unexplored and contain countless treasures. She clutched the scroll in her hands with displeasure and said that the map she had was only a quarter of the full map. She said that the map was not completed, and even if it was completed, it was still dangerous to enter the secret dungeon. The girl smiled radiantly, closing her eyes, and said that she needed a companion and invited Ling Chanfeng to become him. The main character remained silent and simply moved on, which made her taken aback. Night fell, stars and a full moon were visible in the sky. Ling Chanfeng and the girl were sitting near the fire. She asked his name, and he introduced himself. The girl's name was Su Ketsun. She put her palms under her head and smiled. A column of smoke rose into the air from the fire. There were tents next to the fire, and Su Ketsun and Ling Chanfeng were sitting on logs. The girl asked him if the person she wanted to know about was also from Huaking. Although she had not been to Huaking yet, she knew most of the famous people from there, and perhaps she could help. Ling Chanfeng looked at the girl seriously and asked if she knew Ling Care. Su Ketsun looked at him in surprise and asked if he still had an older sister. The main character put his hands on his knees and replied that this was his younger sister. The girl asked how his sister got into university if he himself did not pass the state exam. She assumed that she was accepted as an exception, and the guy agreed with her. Su Ketsun put her hand to her chin. She said that Huaking is a gathering place for geniuses from all over the country, but recently there was only one person who was accepted against the rules, and that was the president of the Huaking First Club. However, she immediately decided that it was not his sister. Su Ketsun frowned and put her hand under her head. She said that such a genius must be very famous, and she didn't understand why she hadn't heard anything about Ling Care. The main character looked at her thoughtfully without saying anything. He remembered the housing complex building in which he lived. The courier told him that there was no addressee in Huaking, so he could only return it to him. Ling Chanfeng picked up the letter and asked if there was definitely a person named Ling Care there. The postman said that he had checked repeatedly and there was no such name, so he asked if Ling Chanfeng remembered the name correctly. The main character lay down on his back with his hands under his head. He said he has since tried every possible means to get in touch, but has never received a response. Smoke from the fire poured into the sky. Ling Chanfeng threatened that he would take revenge if they harmed his only family member. Su Ketsun lay down next to him and smiled. She calmed him down and said that Huaking is not a den of wolves and tigers. She added that if his sister had been enrolled, then she would have received countless resources to grow. Su Ketsun turned over on her stomach and put her hands under her head. She asked if he was familiar with the rules of Huaking. The main character answered that the minimum requirements are 600 points for the exam and the 14th level. Su Ketsun frowned with a smile on her face and asked if he knew the unspoken rule. The girl imagined a pyramid along which people were climbing. She said that in Huaking there are groups from E to a grade. The difference in resources is huge. Everyone wants to get into the top class. However, in each class the number of students is fixed. One less student means one more place. Ling Chanfeng frowned and glanced at her and asked if some people resort to tricks when typing. Su Ketsun replied with a sly squint that they could make a competitor disappear, especially a second awakening like him. She sat down on her knees and brushed off the dirt. The girl said that if he only wants to get E grade, then no one will consider him a hindrance, but he needs to learn to cooperate. She stretched and sighed, saying that she felt sleepy. She quietly glanced at the guy, wanting him to beg her to become her partner. Ling Chanfeng headed to his tent and said that he also wanted to sleep. Su Ketsun told him to listen to the meaning of the words, not the words. She asked if he wanted to get into a class and if he wanted to be on the same team with him. The girl listened to him with an upset face. The main character said that as far as he knows, the average annual number of applicants to Huaking from Shanghai is about 20. Among them, 80% are from Chunhua. He stood with his back to her near his tent. Ling Chanfeng said that most of them were in classes E to B. There was not a single person who passed into Class A. The guy looked angry and dissatisfied. Su Ketsun looked after him. The main character said that the strong never leave their comfortable places. The girl listened to him with a serious face. He believed that having united in a group and getting into the best class, you would always have to count on luck. In their world, where the strong devour the weak, this would be a fatal mistake. Ling Chanfeng stopped and turned to the girl. He was curious why she was so eager to win him over to her side, since no one would voluntarily reveal their treasures to the first person they met. He also noticed that she patiently explained the value of the treasure, as if she was afraid that he would not be interested. Su Ketsun awkwardly looked away. She was sweating from exertion. Ling Chanfeng said that she was also hinting that Chunhua could become his support, and he did not believe that it was all because of her kindness. Moreover, it is equal to another competitor of Chunhua. Su Ketsun smiled, closing one eye. She admitted that she didn't expect him to be so insightful and said that she was really winning him over to her side. Ling Chanfeng turned his head in her direction when she said that she was not luring away the current him, but the future one who had potential. The girl turned away from him, raising her hand. She said that she was also not very sure whether it was an ordinary dream or a prophetic one. In any case, her sixth sense is much stronger than that of ordinary people, since she is an illusionist of a rare profession. Su Ketsun put on a serious face and said that she needed to gain power as soon as possible. She believed that the world would change and many would be eliminated. The sky was full of stars and a column of smoke seeped through the trees. The sun brightly illuminated the medieval city, where there were castles and small houses. Merchants attracted customers and advertised their goods. Ling Chanfeng walked through the streets, looking around. Su Ketsun approached him from behind and said that the City of Eternal Sleep is the only trading area in Zishan. The girl was wearing a short black top, shorts and a jacket. She said that according to rumors, this place was built by a high-ranking mega and several equally high-ranking architects. The fog can block monster invasions. Over time, this has become a gathering place for professionals located in Zishan. Only in this abandoned neighborhood can one find worthwhile things. Ling Chanfeng took a look at her appearance and asked why she changed her clothes. Su Ketsun put her hands behind her back and replied that the girl did not need a reason to change clothes. The main character came closer to her and asked where the guy she was talking about was. The girl frowned and replied that he was a second-year student at Huaking University. He was in Class A and very influential. This guy thought he could meet anyone he wanted. Ling Chanfeng frowned, looking to the side with suspicion. Su Ketsun said that this guy has a brother who is in debt. She was interrupted by the arrival of Qin Shan, a blonde guy in a jacket, and his entourage. He shouted displeasedly that Su Ketsun eventually returned. Qin Shan looked serious. He said that everything was ready for the third raid. He asked where the girl was. After that, Qin Shan grabbed Su Ketsun's hand. Ling Chanfeng approached him in the form of a poison lizard. The girl looked at him slightly confused, realizing that he had changed his appearance. Qin Shan's eyes flashed, and he aggressively asked if the guy wanted to die. The main character put his hand on his shoulder while Su Ketsun tried to break free from his grip. Ling Chanfeng squeezed his hand on Qin Shan's shoulder. The white-haired guy turned to him and assumed that he was a professional in physical enhancement. He furrowed his eyebrows and grinned evilly and threatened him with violence for such behavior. Su Ketsun frowned, angry, and called out to him. She asked if he had said that he had already prepared for the third raid, and if he wanted to make his brother wait. The girl closed her eyes and walked away while Qin Shan looked at her silently, and she called him with her. The two of them walked away from Ling Chanfeng. Qin Shan told her that her sudden disappearance had angered her brother, and although it was none of his business, when an unimportant person stood in front of his brother, he could not guarantee what might happen. Su Ketsun closed her eyes and replied that he had misunderstood and that guy was not with her. Ling Chanfeng silently listened to their conversation with a serious face. He watched their backs as they walked further away. Su Ketsun asked if they had found a way to attack the third level. Qin Shan replied that they bought the information from one merchant. They checked it and decided that everything would work. The girl turned around with a guilty look and apologized to Ling Chanfeng in a ghostly voice. She said that she would find an opportunity to help him and then find him. The protagonist's pupils constricted and his mouth parted. From underneath his robe were the red eyes of the undead. He thought that the cut in the darkness was very convenient and that he could simply disappear into the darkness. Suddenly, a guy and a girl approached him from behind, who mistook him for a poisonous lizard because of his appearance. Ling Chanfeng was taken aback and panicked. The stranger put his hands on his thigh and asked where the poisonous lizard had been all this time. The main character looked at him and remembered how the enemy spoke on the phone. It was the hunter's accomplice, a blonde man with an optical device on his left eye. He relayed the boss's words that if he didn't come back, he would treat the guy to hot pot with lizard. The blonde hugged Ling Chanfeng in a friendly manner and said that he had already refused the boss. He asked how he could put a protected animal in boiling water. The main character laughed awkwardly. The blonde man pressed himself close to him and said with a serious face that every time he jokes about lizard hot pot, he puts on a straight face, but this time he laughed. Ling Chanfeng's face became frightened. The blonde grabbed him and shot blue fire, asking who he was. The main character screamed loudly, causing the blonde to move away from him, and passers-by were shocked. A system window appears. The creatures you summoned have fallen. Ling Chanfeng's body was surrounded by blue flames, and he gritted his teeth in pain. He knew that that guy's abilities were definitely beyond his own level. The main character told himself to fight. Suddenly, his pupils shrank in shock. The crystal in his inventory began to absorb energy again. All the blue fire began to enter Ling Chanfeng's chest. The flame gradually became smaller. The crystal worked again and absorbed the energy, like with a snake egg. The blonde was taken aback and even began to cry, asking Ling Chanfeng what he did with the fire. He begged to release the flame back. The main character smiled contentedly. Although this time the experience did not increase so much, there is definitely some connection between these two cases. He decided to figure out the logic of how the stone works in order to increase the level many times faster. The whining blonde man closed his eyes and asked Akhenet if she was watching the show, saying that he lost this time. A blue portal appeared behind Ling Chanfeng, and he turned around. A hooded girl emerged from the portal, her face covered with purple flowers. She ordered Poison Lizard to bring back the bone fire. Akhenet said that Lu Gu, under Xiao's orders, gave him a little punishment as a warning for leaving without permission. Ling Chanfeng turned around and said with an evil smile that he was now a poison lizard. Akhenet approached them and said that only his lizard clone could have the ability to withstand Lu Gu's flames. Lu Gu said something about his light again. The main character frowned as he looked at them. He realized that the poison lizard was stronger than he had imagined. His opponent was defeated by pure chance. Lu Gu pointed his finger at Ling Chanfeng and agreed with the girl. He asked, if the poison lizard was so easy to replace, then how could he join them? So he didn't doubt him. He just wanted to give him a warm welcome. The main character smiled slightly evilly, agreeing with him. He said that he could not return this greeting. Lu Gu replied that it was not necessary, and his flames slowly grew. Akhenaten turned to him and asked if his supplies would affect their next plan. Lu Gu replied with a doomed face that there was barely enough supplies. Ling Chanfeng looked at them silently. Akhenaten's face was hidden by purple flowers with yellow centers. She said that this would serve as a lesson to him and that it was time for them to go. The main character walked behind Akhenaten and Lu Gu. The guy whined about how his fire had eaten so many people, and this time he was finally eaten. Ling Chanfeng frowned and lowered the corners of his lips. He believed that Akhenaten was worse than Poison Lizard and Lu Gu. The main character thought that if these two really fought now, even his indestructible will would not save him. Judging by their voices and appearance, they are all the same age. Ling Chanfeng was also worried about the mysterious Xiao. Lu Gu turned to him and told him to keep up, and since they clashed, he should go on a mission with them. Ling Chanfeng stayed behind him and Akhenaten. Passers-by looked at them. A huge coliseum with many seats. There were lanterns at the entrance to the coliseum. Su Ketsun walked behind Qin Shan, angrily showing his fist at him. The girl turned around in alarm, looking at the other people. Qin Shan entered the elevator and waited for Su Ketsun to join him. He pressed the button for the desired floor and said that in the future she would find out. According to him, somehow in normal times they cannot get this thing. Su Ketsun crossed her arms while listening to Qin Shan. He said that here, where the highest level is 25, his brother is determined to get it. The elevator stopped at the 17th floor. As soon as the elevator doors opened, a woman's foot in a shoe appeared. She was a dark girl with red hair. A tall blonde man with a scarf around his neck followed her and asked why don't they go to the 18th floor. The girl replied that Qin Yui was already there, asking if he wanted to feel his cold gaze so soon. The blonde replied that he didn't think so. He said that the guy had become famous in Huaking for his aloofness, and his gaze sent tremors through the body. The girl with red hair turned around with a smile on her face and asked if he was afraid. Her name was Wang Zhu, a member of the Huaking University Field Research Association, and a ghost hunter. The blonde blushed deeply and answered with a grin that everything was wrong. He said that as a third-year student, he wanted to see what the first person from Class A in the second year could do. The blonde guy's name was Li Shi. He is also a member of the association and is a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Wang Zhu walked towards the stairs, where the rest of the participants were already standing. She told Li Shi that if he could fight Qin Yui to a draw, then that would be glorious. The girl added that he is not their only opponent. There are two more from the Winter Hunters Association, and others who want it just as much. Li Shi frowned, a fang protruding from his mouth. He said that Qin Yui thought that only he knew that the purple and gold monster was here. He said that in the past 2 days, the news had reached all Huaking groups, and this time the competition for the Golden Scroll had already changed its flavor. The guy and the girl walked up to the balcony and looked down. Wang Zhu said that it is a purple and gold monster with a nobler bloodline than the golden one. They had not met him in Great Xia for many years. The girl relayed the president's words that this was a bad sign, and they should be careful. In the arena, a man fought against a monstrous lion of gigantic proportions. Li Shi told the girl not to exaggerate. The man with the sword in his hand was breathing tiredly. There were abrasions on his face. It was Uncle TZI. He wiped the sweat from his face, thinking that he would definitely save Yan and the others. Ling Chanfeng was taken aback when he saw him. He didn't understand why he was here and didn't leave. He was asked if he knew this man. As soon as he was asked the question, the guy turned back. TZI fought fearlessly with the terrible lion. Lu Gu stood next to the main character. He replied that he was simply curious what kind of person would fight in the arena, wasting his life and knowing that he would lose. Lu Gu ate chips and answered with his mouth full that fight is a noble and wonderful word. According to him, this man was forced to enter into a slave contract with an unknown person and began to earn money. He believed that a man was not worthy to fight. Lu Gu turned his head to Ling Chanfeng and stated that this was not a question that Poison Lizard could ask. He asked if he had done this in the past. The main character closed his eyes and replied that that's why he wondered what it would be like if he sent him there. They stood on the balcony, looking out over the arena. Lu Gu suggested we chat a little about what they would do next. Ling Chanfeng replied that it is better that he has valuable information, because he does not like to waste time. A portal appeared between them, from which Akonet's head poked out. She said she found out everything. The woman came out of the portal completely and said that there are many new people from Huaking. She asked them to be vigilant. Lu Gu was happy about this and said that the official hunt had not started yet, but it was also great to try the delicacies beforehand. Ling Chanfeng asked what they were up to. Akonet turned to Lu Gu and asked if he told him. The blonde replied that he was just about to tell everything. He shouted that they were planning a robbery. The main character immediately tensed. He frowned and his pupils narrowed. The presenter entered the arena in the center of the Colosseum. He announced to the numerous guests on the 18th floor that it was time for the finale of the auction. The presenter was dressed in a purple suit. He raised his index finger and said that the last lot was a very specific product. He could confidently say that after seeing this thing, regardless of whether they received it or not, they would know that the visit was worth it. Spectators in the stands began to be indignant and say that he was lying. They did not understand how one could get pleasure from just one glance at a treasure. Among them sat Ling Chanfeng, who did not say anything. The presenter was watched by a man with long white hair, who was looking at a huge screen. The presenter smiled widely, showing off his fang. He said that the guests had seen many ordinary treasures, but now he presented them with a treasure with a human form. He asked them if they had ever seen anything like this. Su Ketsun and Qin Shan stood behind a man with long white hair who was sitting in a chair. His name was Qin Yui. He was from the Winter Hunters Association. The presenter walked to the edge of the arena as the floor in the middle began to move apart. He told the audience to greet today's hero. A cage appeared in the arena. Inside was someone's spidery dark silhouette. The main character looked at this with interest. Behind the cage was an arachnid. It was a humanoid spider with blue skin and a purple body. The spectators were shocked. Their eyes widened in surprise, not knowing whether it was a man or a monster. The spider looked scared and confused as Qin Yui and the others watched her through the screen. Su Ketsun asked if there had been recent preparations to rob this purple and gold monster. She said she didn't expect to see this. Qin Shan grinned smugly and said that this is a very rare arachnid and an ordinary person would not know about it. Only the best libraries have some records about them. Su Ketsun raised her hand and said that monsters and humans are too different, asking if the spider would help them. Qin Shan said with an evil grin that they are using a monster. The girl frowned and asked him again with suspicion. While their retinue was stretching, Qin Shan closed his eyes with a smile and said that she was an unusual monster. He almost told her peculiarity. Suddenly, the guy in the black t-shirt was thrown into the wall, which made the others taken aback. Qin Shan sweated from exertion and looked at his older brother, Qin Yui. The younger brother closed his eyes, frowning, and told the girl that she would still find out about everything in time. Su Ketsun looked at him with a calm face, but did not answer. The presenter pointed to the cage with the spider. The starting bid is 2 million. The man understood that many were unsure due to concerns about the danger of the monster. He convinced the audience that she had passed the auction hall test. Even though she was level 30, she was completely devoid of combat skills. Arachnid looked away shyly, covering her body with her arms. The presenter said that it is an excellent decoration for the home, and today the audience was lucky to stumble upon such a curiosity. The man with the gold chains upped the bid to 3 million, causing the audience to look at him in shock. He didn't care whether she was beautiful or not. He wanted to ransom her to eradicate evil. A bald man with a gray mustache showed the number 4 and offered 4 million. This monster had oppressed their family for centuries. He wanted to buy an arachnid to make her suffer and pay his debts. Among the spectators, there was a fat boy who blushed. With a smile on his face, he imagined what he would do if he ransomed the monster. Suddenly, his eyes opened in fear and he screamed. Translucent flowers appeared next to his heart. Suddenly, he leaned forward and the guy with glasses next to him asked him to finish his speech with a smile on his face. Flowers began to sprout through the boy's back. Branches of purple flowers rose up and filled the space. The spectators looked at this in fear, and the boy himself began to look like a dead man. Flowers grew from the back of the guy's head with glasses, and his eyes turned white. The rest of the visitors were also susceptible to this attack, with flowers sprouting from their chests and mouths. The entire arena was filled with a purple aura. People ran away in panic while the presenter radioed about the incident and asked to send employees here. He heard a strange noise and turned his head. There were rockets attached to the arachnid cage, and Lugu was sitting on top. He smiled sarcastically and asked where the people from Huaking University were. The presenter looked alarmed and scared. He replied that they were in several VIP boxes on the second floor. Lugu looked at the aisles of the Colosseum and said that there were so many rooms. He took out a bazooka, which he placed up to his shoulder, and decided to fire one shot at each number. Blue fire began to seep into the barrel of the bazooka at the guy's order. He fired the first shot, which looked like a blue beam. There were several hits on the doors. A spirit with an evil grin was in the air. Blue flames began to seep into every room. Lugu ordered the fire to devour everyone. He got down on one knee on the cage and started laughing evilly. While everything around was in smoke, Qin Yui surrounded himself with a protective barrier. He clasped his hands together and frowned as he watched. Su Ketsun and Qin Shan were also inside the barriers. The guy gritted his teeth and asked what was going on. The girl replied that it looked like an attack. King Yui looked back with a cold face and asked why he didn't die. The wall to the room was broken by Li Shi, who turned into a giant. Wang Zhu stood next to him. The giant replied that some people were very rude, and they didn't even help the high school kids next door. Li Shi looked at the long-haired man and asked where the rest of the people from the Winter Hunting Association were. Wang Zhu looked there indifferently and asked if it was worth asking about this. She said he knew about the leak and cleared the area in advance. Li Shi said that the name of his Winter Hunting Association could persuade most of the Huaking students to retreat. A guy in a blue suit stood next to the broken wall, his arms crossed over his chest. A blonde guy in black clothes was walking up the stairs. A black-haired guy in a red cloak was going downstairs. Li Shi shouted that it was impossible to stop the hunters who were out for blood. A cage was floating above the arena with the help of rockets, and Lugu was standing on it. He smiled evilly as he raised his hands and said that the flame in his blood couldn't wait to devour the Huaking elite. People ran away in panic. Among them was Ling Chanfeng. He thought that this was a great moment to escape. He frowned, turning down the corners of his lips. The main character thought that Ling Care might be among the people from Huaking, and the best solution now would be to send the undead on reconnaissance. For now, he decided to go to the maximum distance from where he could maintain contact with him. Suddenly, someone called out his name, Ling Chanfeng. He looked back with a tense expression. The main character looked at the man in cowboy clothes and asked if he recognized him. It was TZI. He looked badly maimed. The man was wrapped in bandages. He told the guy that he wouldn't do anything bad to him. The undead just appeared again, and he guessed. Ling Chanfeng asked with a wary look if he was afraid that Poison Lizard faked his death. And after TZI left, he killed him. The man closed his eyes and smiled faintly. He said that he believed Ling Chanfeng, and even if Poison Lizard didn't die, he would end up dying again. People were running around them. TZI handed the letter to the main character. Ling Chanfeng asked why he called out to him. The man asked to send a letter to his family. The main character extended his hand to the envelope. TZI said that this is not a wasted effort. He just has nothing to give now. He promised that his family would thank him when they saw this letter. Ling Chanfeng looked at his face with a serious look and asked why he himself would not return and whether the reason was really the slave contract. He didn't know what happened after their team left, but he advised them to escape now. TZI lowered his head and walked past him, replying that he still had some work to do. The sky was blue and the clouds were fluffy. The man gradually merged with the crowd and said that there was no turning back. One of the spectators suddenly fell to his knees. While Lugu was floating in the sky, sitting on a cage, he shouted that he was bored. The arena was in chaos. Blue fire and pink trees killed everyone. The guy shouted that he hadn't done anything yet, but they had already fallen. Someone's bandaged hands began to clap. The unknown person praised them and said that several children dared to fight the humanoid monster. Lugu turned around in surprise at the unfamiliar voice. In a hole in the wall stood a man with a naked torso. He ordered to let go of the spider and leave from here. Lugu looked at him in shock through the purple foliage. The man was dark-skinned and his hair was styled. He smiled and said that his opponent was not him, but Huaking University. There were blue lights around the blonde. He frowned and asked the man how dare he think that he was not as good as the people from Huaking. While hovering under the pink trees, Lu Gu turned to Akonit and asked her to help finish him off. She lay in the pink leaves and replied indifferently that he himself had provoked it. The man crossed his arms over his chest, listening to the blonde. Lu Gu replied with an irritated face that he could not give free rein to his hands because he did not take him seriously, which means he could not do it. An evil smile appeared on the man's face, and he assumed that the guy was one of those who would not calm down until the very end. A bright yellow flash rushed towards the blonde. It was the man himself. He punched Lu Gu hard, causing the guy to fly back. The guy was thrown towards the wall, which was cracked from the collision. Qin Shan and Su Ketsun emerged from one of the holes in the wall. The girl looked very angry, and the guy shouted in fear that the guy seemed strong, but was defeated with one blow. Beads of sweat ran down Su Ketsun's face. She frowned and told him to take a closer look at the man. This was a level 23 explosive boxer. He smiled smugly, placing his hand on his hip. He looked towards the hole in the wall where the Huaking people were. The explosive boxer mockingly said that their maximum level was 20, and they would not be able to resist him even if they teamed up. He stated that he was a level 23 martial artist, and no one could withstand even one blow from him. Wengju began to laugh, covering her mouth, and Li Shi looked at her strangely. The girl's reaction angered the explosive boxer, and he angrily asked what she was laughing at. The red-haired girl crossed her arms over her chest and narrowed her eyes slightly. She asked what kind of place he thought Huaking University was and whether he thought everyone was accepted here. The explosive boxer scrunched his face tensely. He awkwardly showed the number 5 with his finger and asked to give him 5 million, because that's how much this monster costs. He said that as soon as he receives the money, he will immediately give the spider back. Qin Yui calmly drank his tea while Wengju urged Li Shi to fight him. She joked about his last name, causing him to react annoyed. The muscular blonde stood on the edge of the broken floor and pointed his finger at the explosive boxer. The guy assumed that he did not study in Huaking, because otherwise he would have known that levels are important, but in order to become strong, you need to consolidate each level. While he was talking about how it was like a lake and a pond, the undead Ling Chanfeng was sitting in the shelter. Li Shi said that there is more water in the lake, but the drainage hole in the pond is larger. Then the explosive force of this pond becomes more powerful in a short period of time. The main character thought that these were serious statements. Qin Yui slowly drank tea from a white cup. Li Shi asked the boxer if he thought that the second year's class genius was only level 20 now. The blonde was covered in a fiery aura and grinned. He quickly approached the frightened boxer. Li Shi punched him, saying that he had made a measly difference of 3 levels last year. The explosive boxer fell onto the cage, causing the floor to break. He covered his face with his hands, and the whites of his eyes turned red. He called them self-confident boys and shouted that he grew up on the blood of a monster. The veins on his arms swelled and turned blue, which made the man taken aback. Putting his fists forward, Li Shi walked towards him again with an ominous smile. He shouted that he wasn't finished yet. The guy furrowed his eyebrows and his pupil narrowed. The explosive boxer's skin was covered with blue growths that emanated electricity. After that, he was completely covered with blue lightning. Li Shi covered his face with his hands while flying. There was a bright blue explosion, and the entire arena was destroyed. Wengju looked there in fear and called out to Li Shi. The robber's base was surrounded by a fence, and a sign with a skull hung above the entrance. One of the bandits said that he deceived the man, saying that if he signed a slave contract, he would not harm the others, and he believed him. 2 guys were grilling kebabs. A man in a white t-shirt was holding a skewer of meat and told his friend that he had been eating well lately. The man with blonde hair replied that he was sorry that with all his tricks he could not find out where the crystals came from. As the black-haired man chewed his food, he realized why the blonde had come to him. He proposed to conclude a deal, regardless of whether the treasury would contain gold scrolls in addition to gold ore. Since he uses his abilities, he will not take less than what he deserves. The blonde was holding a skewer of fried meat in his hands. He calmed him down and said that he knew the rules. The sun shone brightly on the wooden gate and the skull sign. The black-haired one asked the blonde if he sold one to the arena, and if there would be problems after that. The blonde laughed and replied that he should be happy that he became a slave. Otherwise, he would be the same as the others. The wooden gate at the entrance shattered into splinters. Both guys were taken aback and looked there in shock. TZI stood at the entrance. Pieces of the broken gate lay in front of him. He smiled evilly, looking at the bandits. The bandits looked at the man and were surprised. The black-haired guy said that he was unlucky, as he longed for death. The blonde took out 4 knives and replied that it was luck, because this man was sold to the arena. He told his friend that his abilities would come in handy right now. The brunette ate the meat and asked if he could handle it himself. The blonde threw the knives, from which came a green trail. He said that it would be easy to defeat the man because of his half-dead state. All 4 knives pierced Tizai's body. The blonde began to pull on the green threads, saying that his whole body was depressed. The brunette grinned and walked towards the man. He raised his hand above Tizai's head, using magic. He said his ability to read the brain could turn him into a retard. The guy grabbed the top of the man's head with his palm, causing him to open his eyes and mouth. He saw Tzi sitting on the ground. He screamed loudly as the bodies of his allies lay next to him. Then, there was a vision of Tzi and his team being surrounded by hunters. He asked who they were, and one of them asked in response who could be found in the wilderness. A memory appeared of how his team helped each other out of the cave. Tzi said that if you take the gold ore and sell it off, then this trip will be useful. The girl admitted that she did not think that they would survive thanks to Ling Chanfeng. Tzi had 3 golden balls in his palm and said there was no turning back. The brunette's face became worried. He was in no hurry to remove his hand from the man's head. The blonde man who was holding the green threads asked him if he had found a source of gold ore. The worried brunette raised his head and replied that he almost found it, but the projection turned off. He said that he saw 3 pills. Suddenly Tzi came to his senses and abruptly ran behind the guy. The man punched him in the head, knocking him to the ground. The guy lay face down, showing no signs of life. A threatening and frightening aura appeared around Tzi. He extended his hand forward. The blonde got scared and started sweating when he realized it was a burgundy aura. The man came as close to him as possible. There were only a few centimeters between them. He grabbed the guy by the neck and lifted him into the air. Tzi's eyes were red, and he asked hostilely where his team was. The blonde was suffocating as he looked at him. He realized that the man had taken an illegal drug given to slaves before a death match. Tzi grabbed his face and pinned him to the grill. The blonde began to sob, realizing that his skin was being fried alive on a hot grill. Tzi looked very angry. He frowned and asked again where his team was. He pressed the blonde's face against the grill with his hand more and more. The guy replied that they were in a forbidden arena. The man pressed so hard on his head that the grill broke. He bared his teeth, looking to the side, and thought about the forbidden arena. The sky in the forbidden arena was blue and the sun was shining brightly. Houses could be seen behind the fence. There was a magic circle with a pentagram on the sidewalk, with 5 people standing around. One of them told the boss that they had been preparing for the awakening ritual for half a day, but they had not received any orders. He suggested taking a break. The boss replied that without the order of His Excellency, one cannot deviate even 1 step from the ritual. The guy in the blue jacket looked unhappy. He told the hooded man that they, the 6 Zishan Braves, are still famous among the hunters. He asked what kind of person made him so afraid. The hooded man replied that they had not met him and did not know how terrible he was. A huge pink tree with a red aura grew from the back of one of the corpses. The hooded man said they killed to get the treasure. A black and red aura began to cover the victim's body. The hooded man said he was born to kill. A wide smile appeared on the guy's lifeless face, and he raised his head. Wang Zhu looked at the blue smoke from the cliff and called out to Li Shi. She began to look calmer as soon as she heard that he was fine. The guy was squatting. He was surrounded by a protective barrier. The boxer's body was burning next to him. Li Shi said he reacted quickly and used the canopy to shield himself from the fire. Wang Zhu frowned and fired a green beam from her hand, shouting that she would help him. The green beam began to interact with the blue dome. Li Shi opened his eyes wide and loudly ordered her not to do this. He said that this thing absorbs energy. It will quickly turn off her abilities. The blue dome began to absorb the powers of the girl's beam. There was still pink foliage nearby. Wang Zhu gritted her teeth and clicked, clenching her hand into a fist. She sat down on one knee while in the hole in the wall. Pink leaves and blue fire filled the entire arena. Qin Shan's pupils shrank as he asked in horror what kind of ability this was. Su Ketsun frowned and said that the fire seemed to be alive. Qin Yui approached Wang Zhu. He put his hands behind his back and said that Li Shi's endurance would last for another 10 minutes. The girl asked what he meant. The muscular blonde man held the barrier with all his might. Qin Yui said that the source of any ability is a person. Because of a person's decision, any ability can lose its support. But they didn't know who started the fire. The arachnid, who was still in the cage, looked at the blue flames in horror. Qin Yui narrowed his green eyes and said that that spider girl was his. Wang Zhu frowned and agreed with him, but said that they would limit themselves to only the girl. They would never give up the purple and gold monster. Qin Yui placed one palm over the other. Something sparkled between them. He said he didn't care. As soon as he put his palms together, a bubble appeared around him. This bubble first reached the ceiling and then began to fill the entire arena. On the roof, Lu Gu was holding onto the bars. The bubble also reached the living dead. Even the creature summoned by Ling Qianfeng was affected. Akhenaten, who was lying on the foliage, remained silent. Qin Yui narrowed his eyes and smiled softly, inviting everyone to come out of hiding. The walking dead man stepped forward and said that this was interesting. Black smoke came from his body. Akhenaten stood up and was surprised. She asked when he came and if Zio knew. Ling Qianfeng, in the body of an undead, was hiding behind the wall. He didn't understand what this ability was. For a moment he felt like he was being seen through. There was a green light around Wang Zhu. She said that there were 4 creatures. A green glowing bow appeared in her hands. She released the bowstring and several bright green arrows flew out at once. The girl shouted that she would destroy them. The first arrow hit the walking dead man. Akhenaten easily dodged the arrow by ducking her head. The undead Ling Qianfeng looked in surprise at the projectile that hit him. Lu Gu had to let go of the grating on the ceiling to avoid being hit by an arrow. While in the air, he summoned bone fire. A plate of blue fire appeared underneath it. The guy frowned and sighed in disappointment, deciding that that was all. The visor fell from his eyes, and he was taken aback when he saw what was moving towards him. As he cut through the air, the arrows continued to pursue him. He shouted that the shells were homing. The bright sun warmed the tiled roofs of the low buildings. Ling Qianfeng, in his usual appearance, frowned, sweat dripping down his face. He realized that these were Huaking students, since the shot was really powerful. The main character decided that the only mistake he made was that his level was too low now. Even if he finds out something about Ling Care, he will not be able to fix anything. The guy stood on the roof and looked at the majestic building of the Colosseum. His first priority is to become stronger as quickly as possible. Ling Qianfeng looked down when he noticed someone. In the crowd of people, he noticed Uncle TZI, who was covered in a burgundy aura. The main character jumped off the roof and approached the man from behind. He called out to him. The guy put his hand on the man's shoulder, after which his eyes rolled back. Ling Qianfeng asked why he came back, and he wanted to ask a question about his body. Jai's burgundy aura knocked him back several meters. As he flew through the air, his pupils constricted. The main character deftly landed on the sidewalk, not understanding what happened. TZI turned around. His eyes were red and angry. He grinned. Ling Qianfeng frowned as he examined it carefully. He noticed the man's aggressive gaze and his strange powers. He didn't understand what had happened in such a short time. The crystal in his inventory became covered in an aura. Ling Qianfeng noticed that the stone reacted, suggesting that TZI had energy that could be absorbed. The man looked furious, and the protagonist realized that according to past experience, the more abundant the energy absorbed, the darker the stone was. The main character frowned and narrowed his eyes slightly. He felt that there was practically no difference between this power and bone fire, but the reaction of the stone was more calm. As TZI walked forward, Ling Qianfeng clenched his hand into a fist and decided to take a chance. Lu Gu was sobbing and sweating from tension. He shouted to Akhenaten that if she didn't save him from this bad woman, he couldn't stand it anymore. The guy was floating in the sky, running away from Wang Zhu's arrow. Akhenaten looked at him silently. Suddenly, she felt something through her aura. She realized that the magical field had been activated. Wang Zhu stood on the rubble with a bow in her hands. Akhenaten called out to her. Standing surrounded by pink foliage, the woman said she hoped she would show her full strength the next time they met. Wang Zhu frowned angrily and called her impudent, saying that no one had ever escaped the hunters. Akhenet's face began to disappear into the blue portal. The released arrow flew past the portal she had used. The red-haired girl looked at this with concern and was taken aback. A blue portal appeared in the path of Lu Gu, who was still running away from the arrow. Akhenaten leaned out from there and extended her hand, telling the guy that it was time for them to go. Lu Gu shouted that she had finally arrived. They grabbed each other's hands tightly. While the guy was entering the portal, a green arrow flew past. Qin Shan was taken aback, his pupils constricted. Su Ketsun frowned and suggested that Akhenaten was an extremely rare spatial professional. A portal began to open at the top of the Colosseum. Akhenaten and Lu Gu jumped out from there. The blonde looked at his ally in fear and asked why she pulled him out. They agreed to appear worthy to the people of Huaking, but now he feels awkward. The woman turned to him and asked if he was the one asking for help. Lu Gu scratched his cheek with his finger and reminded him that he was not strong in resisting long-range attacks. He asked if she could move the arrows to another space so that she would not have to run away. He said that if they ran away, it would be worth taking the spider with them. Akhenaten pointed her finger down where the guy then looked and said that the situation had changed. Huge red hands grabbed people. One of them was trying to get out of the trap and asked the boss what it was. The hand tightened its grip on the man, who then began to bleed from his mouth. The guy in the hood was also crushed to death. He let out a dying cry. Lu Gu looked at what was happening with concern and shock. He asked what it was, and Akhenaten replied that it was a ritual for awakening the arachnid. People from Huaking and Su Ketsun gathered near the spider's cage. Lu Gu asked what it means to awaken an arachnid. The ally told him that this would allow the level 30 arachnid to show his true colors. A black and red aura appeared around the spider. Her face became angry and her eyes were red. A red aura filled the entire Colosseum arena. Screams could be heard from there as Lu Gu and Akhenaten looked on from the top. A huge and powerful red beam rose into the sky. The blonde screamed in fear and began to back away. A portal opened next to him and his ally told him to leave. A huge beam of energy destroyed something right in the air. Qin Yui frowned and looked at it warily. This energy came from the spider. The man's hair fluttered in the wind, and he covered his face with his hand. The beam that rose into the sky activated a magic circle with a pentagram. Passers-by watched this. The walking dead man lying on the floor joyfully exclaimed the word bingo. Qin Yui turned to him. The dead man raised his head, holding out his hand, and smiled. He declared that death and horror were coming. The sky began to turn black, and the energy from the beam began to spread everywhere. The dead man shouted that they would all die. A frightened passerby pointed his finger at the sky. People asked what was happening in the forbidden arena. A huge web appeared in the sky above the beam. The spider attached her paws to the web, where a magic circle appeared. She crossed her arms over her chest and began to wrap herself in a cocoon. Ling Chanfeng frowned and looked at her suspiciously. Several system windows have appeared. A skill affecting the hunting zone area has been detected. Area of effect is immune to skills below Monarch level. The protagonist's face looked serious. He understood that such a skill was extremely rare among monsters. The guy asked the fallen angel what effect was in the area. A purple system window has appeared. Hunting zone effect. The prey level is suppressed within a radius of 1 kilometer. The bloodlust effect is active. With each prey caught, your combat power increases. The spider was completely wrapped in a huge cocoon. Ling Chanfeng saw the level suppression for the first time. He didn't understand how she was going to hunt if she was now in a cocoon. Red portals began to open next to the web. Huge spiders started jumping out from there. They had sharp limbs and huge jaws. Passers-by near the Colosseum were in a panic. They looked with fear at the terrifying creatures. People began to run away, but the spiders still pierced someone with their paws. One of the spiders headed towards Ling Chanfeng. The main character frowned, and sweat was still running down his cheek. He realized that the spider uses summoning to gain experience, just like him. The guy determined that the spiders were about level 15. Ling Chanfeng sat down on one knee as a black aura appeared around him. He tore off his robe and jumped high, ending up above his opponent. The main character shouted that he was not sitting out in a cocoon. Red eyes flashed in the darkness. An undead creature emerged from the dark aura with a spear in his hand. Ling Chanfeng was approaching the cocoon. The summoned creature threw a spear and killed the spider. The main character was able to grab the spear in flight. Holding a weapon in his hands, he headed upward. The tip of the spear stuck into the cocoon. The guy grabbed the hilt of the weapon and sat down there, taking out the crystal. The crystal began to absorb energy from the cocoon, which Ling Chanfeng shouted about. A system window appears. You have gained a sufficient amount of experience. The level has been increased to 13. The main character smiled, his face illuminated with purple light. He realized that the crystal was not resisting. Inside the cocoon, there was a spider in a half-bent state. The mark on the back of her head began to sparkle. Something resembling worms began to come out from there. Ling Chanfeng noticed a strange glow and was taken aback. Purple lightning appeared around the cocoon where the arachnid was located. The main character tensed. In a panic, he covered his face with his hands and shouted that things were bad. A burst of orange energy knocked Ling Chanfeng back, causing him to scream. On the streets of Yangmian City, there were flags hanging between medieval houses. Lu Gu asked if Zio planned everything, why he didn't say anything, and why Akhenaten didn't say anything either. The ally ordered him to shut up and said that it was necessary. They walked along the streets next to stone houses. Akhenaten said that the more valuable the item, the more difficult it is to obtain, but the easier it is to make a person believe. Lu Gu asked what to believe. The woman turned to him and asked if she had said that they would go after the spider. Would he have behaved as casually? The guy suddenly fell silent and began to sweat, realizing that she was right. They stood near the entrance to the building and saw a letter on the table. Akhenaten took the note in her hands and said that it was from Zaya. Lu Gu asked what was there. Maggots are crawling across the skull on the plate. The woman said that someone caused a curse that he placed on the spider. But Huiking University is not involved here. Now Zio is going to figure everything out. Akhenaten did not expect that there were such geniuses in this city. Ling Chanfeng was lying on the road. His face was injured, and the small head of his undead hovered next to him. The main character closed one eye and began to slowly get up. When the stone absorbed the power, the guy did not feel the resistance of the cocoon, but he felt that a completely new force had appeared inside the cocoon. He assumed that this power was capable of controlling the cocoon itself. Ling Chanfeng wiped the blood from his mouth. He looked tense. He didn't know what it was, but he had a chance to raise several levels at once, even if there were casualties. The wall of the Colosseum was destroyed by a blue beam. The main character was taken aback and looked there. Qin Shan, Su Ketsun, and Li Shi fell down with Wang Zhu in their arms. There was a huge hole in the wall where someone's bones lay, and in the distance the silhouette of a man could be seen. Qin Yui was surrounded by smoke and raised his hand. The bones in the wall began to assemble into a human skeleton. He said that the man's level had been suppressed and reduced to 15, and his combat power had not changed at all. The skeleton suggested that the man really wanted to kill him. Qin Yui watched as the skeleton adjusted its head. He asked if it was because he had awakened the spider's second form. The arachnid's eyes were closed. The skeleton said that he would have to hurry. She was still very weak, but she would become stronger until she reached level 30. According to him, having escaped from the cocoon, the spider will be invincible. The skeleton put his hand on his chest and offered a deal. He said that Qin Yui would get the spider and he would kill all his friends. A dark and threatening aura appeared around Qin Yui. He asked if the skeleton wanted to die and said that he would help him with this. His opponent was taken aback. The skeleton put his hand on his forehead and began to laugh. He used to think that they had something in common. He stated that Qin Yui was willing to give up his goals for useless people. The skeleton put his hand over his mouth and said that the guy disappointed him. Suddenly, the white-haired guy was behind him. The enemy did not expect this. He was taken aback. Qin Yui extended his hand forward. The skeleton's body was completely destroyed by the guy's power. He narrowed his eyes and frowned, answering that he preferred not to choose. Bones and a skull lay on the floor. Black matter began to emerge from the bones and began to laugh. The matter formed into a silhouette with a red aura. He began to reason about what was better, falling into the abyss or ending up in hell. Qin Yui looked at him seriously. An eerie red face appeared on the matter's head, asking which was better, to live in pain or die. He asked if there was a middle. Qin Yui narrowed his eyes arrogantly. He assumed that the enemy was confident in his abilities and asked if he thought that he did not know who he was. The enemy was taken aback. His mouth disappeared from his face. A blue sphere appeared around the guy. The enemy became wary looking at it. The sphere began to expand, absorbing the walls. The bubble began to absorb street buildings. Qin Yui said that he has control over space, and he feels the aura inside it. The opponent's face turned blue. He frowned and said that he was going a little overboard. A huge bubble covered the entire Colosseum and the forbidden arena inside. Everything inside this zone was painted in negative colors. Wang Zhu and Li Shi watched this in shock. Ling Chanfeng managed to catch Su Ketsun in his arms. They and Qin Shan were taken aback. Qin Yui narrowed his eyes and said that this would be enough. The sky turned orange and the clouds turned black. The guy used oblivion, and black matter appeared in the air. Smoke rose and pieces of buildings fell to the ground. The flow of energy caused Wang Zhu to cover her face. Her ally was tense. Ling Chanfeng and Su Ketsun also covered their faces from the wind. They looked at Qin Shan falling onto his back. The main character continued to hold the girl in his arms. She asked Qin Shan if he was okay. The guy frowned angrily and was shocked by Ling Chanfeng's appearance. He rushed out of his seat, raising his fist, and ordered the main character to take his hands off Su Ketsun. Between Ling Chanfeng and Qin Shan, an undead appeared with a shield in their hands, which stopped the attack. The green-eyed guy frowned and was taken aback by the blocking of the blow. The undead waved its shield and Qin Shan was thrown back. There was a bruise on his face and he looked angry. The main character looked at him, in front of whom stood the creature he had summoned. Qin Shan clenched his teeth in aggression. He didn't understand how Ling Chanfeng became so strong in just a few days or where his talent came from. Su Ketsun frowned angrily and ordered him to stop. A spider appeared above her, which Ling Chanfeng noticed. The girl extended her hand and said that now was not the time for quarrels. A huge spider attacked them. The main character managed to grab the girl and dodge the blow. The merciless enemy looked at them. While Ling Chanfeng and Su Ketsun were trying to get up, the main character shouted that they had become more aggressive. He told the girl that their mother was about to leave the cocoon and she needed to leave now. Su Ketsun frowned and objected, because the spider is a purple and gold monster and their goal, she will not leave here. Ling Chanfeng turned to her and asked about the spider class. The girl looked at him seriously and answered in the affirmative. She said that this had not happened for a very long time in their world. Throughout history, the frequency of appearance of purple golden monsters did not exceed 5%. Now the guy understood why he had never met anyone like him. Huge spiders walked the streets of the city. There was a man impaled on the paw of one of them. Su Ketsun said that there is no time to explain now, but she cannot leave here now. Everything around was immersed in blue-white smoke. Qin Yui stood among this smoke. He told the enemy that he was the first to escape oblivion. The guy grinned and said that he would remember him. On the roof of one of the buildings, there were two white-haired guys. One of them was Zio. He wore glasses and a long robe. Bea was sitting next to him. He was dressed in a gray sweater and pants. Zio reminded him of his words that Qin Yui is not at all like other professionals. You need to be careful with him, otherwise death cannot be avoided. Bea tutted in displeasure and replied that he just didn't expect him to be immune to the hunting zone of a level 30 monster. He told his ally that he had saved his life. Bea looked up and said that at the beginning they were on the same level. He was also affected by suppression, but then it stopped. He didn't think that Qin Yui was deliberately showing weakness. Zio looked into the distance carefree. He said that Qin Yui is a spatial professional. The guy with glasses assumed that he was not immune to the hunting zone. Otherwise, he would isolate himself. Bayer raised his head and asked if he meant to say that Qin Yui had cut himself off from the general space. Zio adjusted his glasses and answered in the affirmative. He said that he couldn't instantly isolate the space, and it would be useful for them. Leia's recklessness benefited them. The guy in the gray jacket covered his mouth with his hand and closed his eyes. He asked his interlocutor why he came. Zio smiled widely and said that he originally wanted to know the status of the curse he placed on the spider. Bayer raised his hand and replied that he might not continue and was not interested. The guy with glasses looked at him and ordered him to stop causing problems, because according to Qin Yui's plan, he must get the spider. Baya stood up and put his hands in his pockets, replying that he was not following orders. Zio smiled tiredly and sighed, saying that he had no discipline. He narrowed his eyes with interest and looked down, saying that his journey had not been in vain. He turned his attention to TZI, who was surrounded by a burgundy aura. The guy with glasses called him an interesting specimen, because he was not torn to pieces by such a colossal external force. Zio raised his hand up. He grinned evilly, concentrating dark energy in his hands. From his hand appeared many red worms with toothy mouths. The guy declared that the man would become his next vermin king. The first worm bit into the back of the man, who screamed shrilly. Then, the next worm latched onto the chest of another passerby. One of the parasites was heading towards TZI. The worm bit into his back, causing him to be taken aback. A red light illuminated Zio's face and body. People zombified by parasites now roamed the streets. Zio ordered them to sacrifice their fresh blood for the new king. TZI grabbed his head as the worm seeped in, his eyes bright red and covered in lightning. An army of people with parasites ran towards the man covered in aura. This was noticed by Su Ketsun and Ling Chanfeng. The main character opened his eyes wide and was taken aback. The girl looked at him and asked if he knew that person. He replied that he used to be on his team. The sleeves of TZI's clothes were torn, and a crowd of zombies was running towards him. Su Ketsun put on a serious face and said that there was something wrong with the man. She guessed that he had taken at least 3 doping pills, which made Ling Chanfeng puzzled. Jai cut off his opponent's head with one blow. The girl said that doping is given to slaves who have entered into a contract with the Forbidden Arena. As a rule, such drugs give a person crazy strength that the human body is not able to tolerate. Doping is usually taken in death matches. TZI dismembered his opponent in half with one swing of his hand. Su Ketsun said that even one tablet causes serious damage to internal organs. She was surprised how the man managed to survive. The main character pursed his lips and narrowed his eyes slightly. He suggested that the power that the stone absorbs is related to substances used in doping. Perhaps he is close to the truth. Ling Chanfeng stood up and walked towards TZI. Su Ketsun, sitting on her knees, asked what he was up to. The guy replied that he had his letter, and he hoped that the man himself would be able to give the note to his family. The girl stood up abruptly and blocked his path, ordering him not to go there. The main character frowned with displeasure and asked why. Su Ketsun raised 2 fingers from which green light emanated and said that he should see it for himself. Ling Chanfeng was taken aback when the girl placed her fingers on his forehead. She said that this is her ability, the Tree of Life. A green mark with a tree appeared on the main character's hand. This mark on his hand glowed. He turned to the girl and asked why he suddenly felt a connection with her heart. Su Ketsun put her hand on her chest and replied that she had entered into a contract with him. All damage he takes will be transferred to him through the Tree of Life, and as long as she is alive, he will not die. Ling Chanfeng looked at her worriedly and asked how she was. The girl smiled self-confidently and pointed at herself. She replied that they exchanged lives, but she is a ghostly messenger and her Tree of Life is much stronger than that of other people, so she is not so easy to kill. The main character began to sweat and coughed into his fist. He asked why she stopped him. Su Ketsun made a serious face and asked to look there again. Ling Chanfeng's eyes opened wide in surprise. Green trees without leaves appeared behind TZI and the rest of the people. Su Ketsun said that only a ghostly messenger can see someone else's Tree of Life, but she gave him this ability. The protagonist's face became worried when he realized what the dried tree meant. He widened his eyes in horror, noticing something. A worm with teeth was spinning on a tree branch. Su Ketsun said that there are strange worms sitting on the trees that seem to control people's lives. She suspected that a person was involved. Ling Chanfeng frowned and gritted his teeth, realizing that he had seen the same worms in the cocoon. He assumed that that boss was controlled by a human. The guy didn't understand why he was hiding and why he needed the spider. The main character thought that when he absorbed the power of the cocoon, he discovered it. Su Ketsun looked at the guy's worried and tense face. She said that it was better for them not to act until they understood the situation. The girl raised her eyebrows in surprise and said that he looked scared and it didn't look like him. One of them said that something terrible would happen soon. The entire city was plunged into chaos, and fires were burning in the streets. A large mechanical bird with 2 people flew over the buildings. The guy in the white t-shirt got down on one knee and said that things were going badly for us, and that we might have to persuade Qin Yui to retreat. The guy with the round purple glasses on his head replied that the purple and gold monster was still here. He asked if he thought they could persuade him. The guy in the t-shirt replied that it was better than death. He had a bandage on his head and a circle-shaped necklace hanging around his neck. He said that others who wanted to get the purple and gold monster would definitely not take risks, which means that the monster would go to the Winter Hunters Association. Qin Shan grabbed Su Ketsun's hand and asked who was tied to her tree of life, threatening that he would kill him. The girl ordered him to let her go, because she herself decided so.
Su Ketsun was able to break free from the grip and said that she could no longer delay their plans for the boss.
Besides, she could still bind Qin Yui to the Tree of Life. Qin Shan looked at her in fear and said that she could only tie 2 people, asking what about him. He turned towards Ling Chanfeng angrily. Su Ketsun ordered him to stop. The main character asked what was the matter now. Qin Shan's pupils shrank and he looked aggressive. Blue energy appeared around him. He intended to kill Ling Chanfeng. The main character raised his hands, looking at him seriously. He understood that this was a level 16 power. Suddenly, Qin Shan was encased in a square barrier. Su Ketsun was also surrounded by a square barrier, which made Ling Chanfeng taken aback. Their cubes began to move, which made the main character puzzled. They found themselves behind him, and Qin Yui stood between the barriers. Ling Chanfeng frowned and gritted his teeth as he activated his dark energy. Qin Yui stretched his hand forward and curled his fingers, surrounded by blue lightning. The next second, the main character himself was imprisoned in a cubic barrier. Qin Yui extended his hand forward, and Ling Chanfeng fell to all fours. He clenched his teeth and closed one eye, realizing that he couldn't breathe. A system window has appeared. A space suppression effect has been obtained. Body weight increases 1,000 times. The green mark on the brush began to glow. Suddenly, Su Ketsun screamed loudly. The long-haired guy looked at her. He narrowed his eyes slightly, but said nothing. The mark on his hand also began to sparkle brightly. He asked if she had given the Tree of Life to Ling Chanfeng. Qin Yui put his hand to his face and closed his eyes. Qin Shan's face was surprised. Su Ketsun slowly began to stand up. The main character widened his eyes and realized that the pressure had stopped. The barriers around them disappeared. Dissatisfied, Qin Shang approached his brother and said that if it weren't for him, he would have turned Ling Chanfeng into mince. Qin Yui replied that he needed power so that he could save his life, and not for trifles. The main character gritted his teeth and wiped his face with his hand. He thought that if Su Ketsun had not shared the damage with him, then there would be nothing left of him. He also noted that this guy is very strong. Qin Shan ran to Su Ketsun and helped her up, asking if she was okay. The girl coughed heavily. Qin Yui approached them and they raised their heads. The guy handed her the red pill and told her to take it. His younger brother was shocked. He asked where he got the prohibited zone doping from. Ling Chanfeng's face was bruised. He gritted his teeth and was also surprised. Qin Yui looked at the web and cocoon in the sky and said that he couldn't wait any longer. He said that if Su Ketsun unlocked the potential of the Tree of Life, he would deal with the spider faster. Su Ketsun closed her eyes and gritted her teeth. Qin Shan shouted that she was only level 15 and could not withstand the effects of the drug. His older brother narrowed his eyes and replied that he still needed her, so for now he would not let her die. Qin Shan gritted his teeth but did not answer. He started to get up, but Qin Yui said that it was not at all difficult for him to break the Tree of Life. He threatened his younger brother that if he took another step, he would get rid of him without a second thought. Ling Chanfeng looked at him angrily. Tusking. He did not understand why the effect of the hunting zone did not work on him. He tilted his head forward and rudely asked whether Huaking University was represented by a person who pushed around the weak. Qin Yui turned to him offended. Suddenly Su Ketsun took the pill from his hand. Holding his hand, she began to get up and said that there was no time and she would take the drug. Her face was bruised and sweaty. She smiled and thanked Ling Chanfeng for standing up for her. However, she said it was up to her and she made a deal with him. The main character looked at her excitedly, but did not contradict her. As soon as Su Ketsun took the pill, a barrier appeared around her and Qin Yui, and Qin Shan was lying on the ground. The cube rushed into the sky, towards the web and the cocoon. Ling Chanfeng watched this silently. There was a small smoke screen between him and Qin Shan. The main character looked at him with a calm face, saying nothing. Suddenly, a huge mechanical bird with passengers landed next to them. Two guys jumped onto the sidewalk. The guy with the glasses on his head said that they didn't have time, and they had to fly faster. The guy in the t-shirt recalled his words that talking here is useless. Qin Shan looked at them happily and shouted that Liu Dun and Zhu Yong had returned. Zhu Yong, the guy in the t-shirt, crossed his arms and asked Qin Shan if they had decided everything about the spider. He answered him that it would take a long time to tell. Ling Chanfeng frowned and lowered the corners of his mouth. He felt that these guys were very strong. Qin Shan pointed at it with a smile and told his friends to help deal with it. The main character was about to run towards them. Liu Dun, the guy with the glasses, said that the higher the level, the stronger the suppression of the hunting zone works. He said that even he and Zhu Yong were level 15, asking what Ling Chanfeng was like. Qin Shan replied that he was a little strange and seemed to be unaffected by the suppression of the hunting zone. Liu Dun turned to him and asked if Qin Yui wanted to kill him. Zhu Yong began to flex his fists, and a pink aura appeared around him. He said he wanted to fight. The guy with the headband confidently walked towards Ling Chanfeng and advised him to immediately give his all, otherwise there would be no such opportunity. Wang Zhu and Li she stood on the wreckage. She told her ally that an interesting show awaits them. This puzzled him. They looked at them, and the blonde immediately recognized Liu Dun and Zhu Yong, asking who the guy was. The red-haired girl replied that she didn't know. Ling Chanfeng frowned with displeasure and said that his opponent was already the third from Huaking University with whom he was disappointed. He said they were all too confident. Zhu Yang raised his finger and replied that he had 1 minute to say his last word. Purple smoke hovered around the main character. A long shadow extended from his legs towards the enemy. Wang Zhu frowned and said that something was wrong. Her friend didn't understand what she was talking about. Ling Chanfeng pointed his finger at his opponent and said that what he said also applied to him. The red-haired girl tensed and noticed the shadow. The shadow in front of Zhu Yong's face began to take shape, his purple eyes glowing. The summoned creature attacked the opponent with a sword, knocking him back. The guy managed to block the blow. He looked up tensely. He was surrounded by two undead. The second had a scythe in her hands. The main character covered his face with his hand. Dark power oozed from his second hand. Fire began to flare up around Zhu Yang, and he frowned. A fiery whirlwind appeared, heading upward. The undead swung his long sword. The summoned creature threw the weapon into the sky. Zhu Yang was able to dodge the attack, but it almost hit him. His pupils constricted, and he looked down. Ling Chanfeng looked at him seriously. Wang Zhu crossed her arms over her chest. Li Shi looked down and said that because of the suppression, Zhu Yang was level 15, but he still took that guy out to 2 levels. He didn't understand how he managed to suppress Zhu Yang's fire form. The girl noted that he is also a summoner. Surrounded by fire, the opponent landed on his feet. He rubbed his thumb across his nose and admitted that Ling Chanfeng was indeed a master. However, he said that if this was all his strength, then he was finished. Zhu Yang stood on the rubble. The main character looked at him and said that if he were level 13, he would have died already. The opponent told him that he was not level 13. Liu Dun stood next to his friend Qin Shan. The guy in the helmet said that even though Zhu Yang is level 15, the double power of the fire form is enough to kill anyone below his level. The enemy swung his fiery fist and grinned. He stated that now Ling Chanfeng will fully experience the difference between the two. A huge beam of fire came out of his fist. The flames blazed and burned brightly. Despite the vast distance, the fire almost reached Ling Chanfeng and his undead. The main character bared his teeth angrily and frowned, declaring that he would cross this abyss. He spread his arms wide, and an army of undead appeared around him. The guy's hair went up and lightning came from his eyes. He used the Monarch's skill enhancements. The undead threw a scythe into the air, which became longer, and there were more blades. The fire turned purple. The scythe rushed along the fiery beam towards the enemy. Wang Zhu and Li Shi were taken aback, not expecting this. Qin Shan opened his mouth in shock. Zhu Yang, who was extending his fist forward, clenched his teeth in tension. Suddenly, a huge robot with a shield appeared right in front of him, protecting him from the attack. This made Ling Chanfeng dumbfounded. The robot showed its mechanical face, and Liu Dun, who was sitting inside, ordered it to stop. Zhu Yang called out to him. The main character pointed his finger at him and asked if he had just told him that he was finished. The guy inside the robot admitted that he is the strongest among the level 13 professionals, not counting Qin Yui, but he will not be able to use this technique in the near future. Ling Chanfeng glanced at him and asked if he wanted to make sure of this. Suddenly everything went dark, and the main character was taken aback. He turned his head towards Qin Shan and realized that this was prohibition magic. Qin Shan's eyes glowed brightly with a blue aura. The robot turned its head in his direction. Liu Dun ordered him to stop and told him to save his strength for the boss. His friend immediately stopped, upset. Ling Chanfeng glanced at his pale palm. He frowned with contempt and asked what he wanted. The robot began to gradually disappear. Liu Dun landed carefully. He calmly looked at the main character and invited him to take part in capturing the purple and gold monster. Ling Chanfeng looked at him in disbelief and asked what he was talking about. A sparkle appeared in his yellow eyes, and he asked if he could decide for Qin Yui. The creatures he had summoned hovered around the guy. Liu Dun, standing at a distance, replied that the purple and gold layer required a powerful summoner. He was just a mechanic and the machines work for him, and it takes a lot of time, but now they have an excellent candidate. The main character listened to him in disbelief. Liu Dun made a serious face and showed 3 fingers. He said that before they did not have enough time, but now everything will be different. His mechanical bird had received information that the monsters on Mount Zishan had begun to act, and within 3 days, an endless wave of monsters would appear here. According to him, even Qin Yui understands the seriousness of the situation. Qin Shan was taken aback by his words and said that he overestimated these creatures. According to him, today's human cities are not places that can be easily invaded by a bunch of monsters from Zishan Mountain. Ling Chanfeng stood at a distance from them. Zhu Yang bent down tiredly. Liu Dun agreed with Qin Shan, but said that this time the time and place of the appearance of the purple golden monster is too deliberate. It may be an unusual wave of monsters. The white-haired guy raised his hands and declared that they didn't even have brains. He asked what could be so special about them. Zhu Yang turned to Liu Dun and asked why complicate everything, and isn't this just another war between people and monsters? He theorized that their ferocity might be due to the awakening of a high-level monster. Hearing this, the main character opened his mouth in shock. Zhu Yang turned to him and pointed his finger at him, asking if he understood. Liu Dun turned to him and said that these were just guesses. Qin Shan's face became worried, and he asked if one purple and gold monster was capable of causing a war. The guy with the glasses on his head turned to him and asked why he thought only one monster had awakened. His friend was taken aback. Ling Chanfeng's pupils shrank in horror. He narrowed his eyes and looked down. Liu Dun asked if it seemed to them that high-level monsters had not waged war against them for a very long time. The last general call was more than 10 years ago. The main character remembered his childhood. The little one sadly lowered his gaze. His mother, who was looking at something in the system windows, turned to him and asked what was the matter. His mother sat down next to him and put her hand on his shoulder. Ling Chanfeng asked why she asked the neighbor to take care of him and little sister. Mom replied that she and his dad were going on a business trip for work, and the boy was already an adult, and they could rely on him. Ling Chanfeng opened his eyes wide and accused his mother of lying. He said that he and dad never went on business trips together, and before she always said when she would return, but not this time. His father entered the room, and he and his mother looked at him. Dad asked the boy if he admired heroes. His father had slicked back hair and was slightly stubbled. He looked at his son over his shoulder and said that the first rule of a hero is to defend the homeland. He stated that during their absence he must protect the house and his sister. Ling Chanfeng looked at him slightly blankly. His little sister was sitting on the sofa. The already adult protagonist pursed his lips and sadly lowered his head. He mentally apologized to his father for not coping, thinking that his father himself never returned. The guy clenched his hand into a fist and raised his head. He looked at the huge cube in the sky next to the magic circle. Ling Chanfeng mentally told his father that the heroes would not benefit from this rule. A huge blue wave spread across it, and in the middle was the silhouette of a man. The wind from the shock wave blew the hair of the protagonist, who thought that heroes needed to become stronger. Liu Dun and Zhu Yang looked at the sky seriously while Qin Shan covered his face. Qin Yui was floating in the sky. He encased the spider and Su Ketsun in 2 different cubic barriers. The guy said everything went well. The boy with glasses looked in shock as a red aura emanated from the spider's body. On the streets, red auras rose into the sky from different points. Li Shi looked at his hands in surprise and asked if the effect of the hunting zone had disappeared. Wang Zhu looked up tensely and said that Qin Yui had subdued the spider. Her blonde friend looked at her, puzzled, and asked if they would participate in the battle. The red-haired girl smiled playfully and asked when he had time to lose heart. Qin Yui controlled 2 cubic barriers in the sky. Li Shi looked at this and asked who knew that he was level 20. The difference in strength was too big. He said that Qin Yui is not at all like an ordinary professional. Wang Zhu put her hands on her hips and asked if he thought that the chairman sent them here to confront him directly. The guy looked at her in surprise and agreed with her. He asked how the chairman could not know that they could not resist Qin Yui and why they were here. Wang Zhu closed one eye and replied that the chairman had predicted something. She said that Qin Yui would face the first failure in his life. At this time, he was floating in the sky with a serious face. Zhu Yang's fist became covered in fire. He extended that hand forward. Liu Dun was taken aback and called out to him. In front of the taken aback Ling Chanfeng stood his undead. The enemy used a flame cage, and a fire broke out around the main character, dissolving his undead. A notification appeared that his undead had been killed. Ling Chanfeng looked at his palm worriedly, initially thinking it was a zone effect. Then, he realized that there were no other effects other than heat, and this was just a trick to evaporate the spiritual power of the undead. Steam was coming out of Zhu Yang's mouth, and his entire body was covered in fire. He walked towards Ling Chanfeng and told him that he was now full of strength. The main character frowned in concentration and asked why he became slower then. The opponent jumped over him and swung his fist. Ling Chanfeng looked unshakable. He said that this technique used up a lot of energy, and even with the level restored, he was trying too hard. Zhu Yang was taken aback by his statement and frowned. The main character stated that the enemy is afraid that he will defeat him. Zhu Yang's fiery fist rushed towards him, and he shouted that this flame cage would become his coffin. Ling Chanfeng frowned and grinned, saying that it had been a long time since he had used the soul decay technique. His white hair rose up. He frowned and glared at his opponent. Zhu Yang felt a strange power, and his pupils shrank. He fell hard onto the sidewalk, a purple trail coming from him. The enemy clenched his teeth and looked up in alarm. Ling Chanfeng was surrounded by red fire, and an undead creature appeared in front of Zhu Yang and swung his scythe. He opened his eyes wide and began to sweat. The summoned creature's scythe almost reached him. Suddenly, a robot appeared between the undead and Zhu Yang, who grabbed the scythe by the handle. Sitting inside the robot, Liu Dun looked at Ling Chanfeng and said that they would finish there. He reminded that he needed to leave his strength to the purple and gold monster. The main character replied that some people don't think so. Zhu Yang stood up, trying to catch his breath. He frowned and clenched his teeth, not understanding what had happened. At that moment, his body seemed to freeze. He had never met a person who made him freeze in horror. Even Qin Yui couldn't do that. Zhu Yang stood up and pushed the robot aside. He asked if it was an illusion. The enemy pointed his finger at Ling Chanfeng and offered to fight again. He didn't believe that some level 13 kid could stand up to him. The robot turned to him and stopped him. Liu Dun ordered him to stop and asked if he forgot what was happening now. He told him to think about how they would fight the monsters. Liu Dun asked if he wanted them all to be buried here. Zhu Yang guiltily lowered his gaze without answering. He turned away from the robot and crossed his arms over his chest. He said that he had never lost to someone who was 7 levels below him. He stated that they would definitely fight, but not now. Zhu Yan stood with his back to the others while the robot's suit disappeared from Liu Dun. He introduced himself and his friend and said that they were from Huiking University. The main character also said his name and said that he was from Dacheng High School. Hearing this, Liu Dun widened his eyes and asked if he was the reawakened one that Su Ketsun was talking about. Zhu Yang turned around in surprise and said that it was now clear why Qin Shan wanted to kill him. The guy in the helmet smiled and said that this explains why he is so strong at level 13. He asked if he had mastered the power of the Awakened One. Ling Chanfeng asked him in surprise, not understanding what he was talking about. Liu Dun asked if he had been told what changes awaited him after his second awakening. The main character frowned and squinted, asking what he meant. Liu Dun lowered his eyebrows and eyelids. He realized that this news had not yet spread, and the forces of different parties had not yet arrived. He was afraid that once it fell into their hands, freedom would end. Qin Yui was floating in the clouds, surrounded by blue lightning. Ling Chanfeng looked at his interlocutor's depressed face and assumed that the changes would not be for the better. Liu Dun put his hands on his hips and said that very soon he would find out everything himself. All he could tell him was that professionals who had mastered the power of awakening could not be divided into simple levels. The guy started talking about something, but suddenly fell silent. He lowered his gaze and decided to remain silent. Liu Dun glanced at Ling Chanfeng's serious face. He realized that the main character was already capable of fighting on par with Zhu Yang, having not yet mastered the power of awakening. He wondered how strong he would be. Suddenly, Qin Yui and Su Ketsun in a cube descended from the heavens. Qin Shan ran towards her, shouting the girl's name. He helped the girl get up and shouted to his older brother that if something happened to the girl, he would kill him. Su Ketsun replied that she was fine. Zhu Yang was the first to head towards them. Liu Dun turned to Ling Chanfeng and told him to go too. He stated that it was time to fight the purple and gold monster. Li Shi looked at his friend and asked what they should do. Wang Zhu jumped down and asked if she didn't believe in the chairman's prophecy. Hearing a negative answer, the girl said that they would act as circumstances required. At this time, Zhu Yang was standing next to Liu Dun, who was explaining the situation to Qin Yui. The long-haired guy lowered his head and repeated the words about the wave of monsters. Zhu Yang glanced at Liu Dun, who said that the sudden appearance of a wave of monsters looked very suspicious. According to him, although nothing is known yet, he feels that their target is here. Therefore, no matter how strong their attack is, they will have to leave here within 3 days. He pointed at Ling Chanfeng and said that he was a summoner and he would greatly reduce their time, so he believed that he could be allowed to join him. A golden scroll appeared in Qin Yui's hands, and he asked why such difficulties. The main character looked at this in amazement. With the help of Qin Shan, Su Ketsun approached Ling Chanfeng and asked if he remembered the secret realm treasure map she was talking about. The girl raised her tired gaze and said that in Qin Yui's hands is a complete map leading to the purple golden boss's nest, the Purple Wing's Nest. Qin Yui opened a scroll that showed various designs. A large crack appeared on the sidewalk. This crack turned into a huge gorge. The scroll was in the air. Ling Chanfeng looked at this in surprise and let out an exclamation of admiration. Su Ketsun looked down and revealed that the treasure map could open a secret realm anywhere within the appropriate limits. In this gap is a purple and gold nest. Qin Yui turned to them and urged them to go there if they were not afraid. He was the first to jump into the cliff from where the dark aura was emanating. The others stood next to the gap. Someone asked what happened to Qin Yui. Previously, they found a secluded place and opened a passage there, but now anyone can enter the secret kingdom. Liu Dun thoughtfully put his hand to his chin. Behind him, a couple of onlookers looked surprised. They approached the cliff and one of them asked if this was really the passage to the secret kingdom. His friend crouched down and said that he felt the aura of monsters. Liu Dun turned to them and advised them not to go down there. One of them asked if he knew. The guy in the helmet looked at them calmly. He replied that he told them everything. After that, he and the remaining team jumped down. A couple of strangers frowned with displeasure and shouted that they were going down, and there was probably a lot of treasure there. They didn't want them to take everything for themselves.